It's time for MacBreak Weekly. Everybody's in the house. Alex, Lindsay, Andy, Ihnatko, Jason Snell. Of course, Apple released its quarterly results. Jason's got the color charts to explain, was it a good quarter or not? We'll talk about a big Apple acquisition. Could be good news, could be bad news for fans. And then, of course, finally, the new MacBook Pro is announced. We'll talk about speeds and feeds, all that coming up next on MacBreak Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is MacBreak Weekly, episode 946, recorded November 5th, 2024. Slow and steady. It's time for MacBreak Weekly, the show where we cover the latest news from Apple. The A-team is in the house. Alex Lindsay from officehours.global. Good morning, Alex.
Hello.
See you.
Good to be here.
You survived the time change. You survived Monday Night Football. Good luck with Election Day.
The gauntlet. Yeah, I already voted. I voted so long ago that I forgot what I voted on. Like
I know.
So
I voted by mail. It's nice. It's a luxury. Also with us, Andy Ihnatko from WGBH Boston. He is in Greater New England. It's good to see you, Andrew.
If we're the A-team, can I be howling mad Matt Murdock?
Sure, you can be anybody you want.
He looks like he has fun, as opposed to the others, which is just all...
And also here, a man whose fingers are every color of the rainbow because he's been making charts, Jason Snell.
It's
6
true.
colors.
It's true. Andy, I think you'll find you've conflated the A-Team's Howling Mad Murdock with Marvel's Daredevil Matt Murdock, and that they are different people. No prize for you.
I believe that you're not familiar with the new Disney Plus What If theory, in which there's a crossover universe between the A-Team universe and the Daredevil universe. I believe he has the best of both worlds. He's
I ain't going on that plane, Cyclops.
I
It's the A-Team, but it's the X-Men. It's the X-Team. Or the A-Men?
Halloween.
Something like that. I don't know. We'll work on it.
At our grocery store, all the clerks
keep
were dressed.
workshopping it,
And I said, "Oh, Spider-Man." He said, "I'm."
yeah, exactly. Now, which one?
Deadpool. Yeah, Deadpool's a little Spider-Man-y with his outfit.
I thought he was a little Spider-Man-y. I wasn't paying that much attention. Hello, everybody. Welcome. The week after the week of Apple.
Mac Weeks.
When we
Mac
last
Week.
met, they had released the Mini and the I forgot iMac, and then that day, the next day, they came out with the MacBooks. I didn't even, it's funny, I didn't even notice. Like Thursday, I said, well, did they ever do anything? Thursday was their annual.
I was kind of the opposite. It was like I was kind of out of sorts on Thursday when there was no new hardware announcement. I was like, well, what am I refreshing this page for?
Yeah, and then there was nothing Friday, right? I didn't miss anything, did I? Okay.
No.
So
That day they rested.
So does anybody, not anybody in particular, Jason Snell, have a MacBook Pro or a Mac Mini to hand?
Well, they don't come out till Friday, so.
Oh, and of course the embargo lifts tomorrow or something like that. So we wouldn't make you talk about it or anything, violating the spirit.
I will say the laptop view. This gets back to Apple's launch. There was a lot of discussion near the end of the week, like should Apple keep on doing this kind of launch thing? And 23 million views on YouTube.
Yeah,
23 million views on YouTube, and they owned Tech Meme for 3 days. Yep. It was like for 3 days. That's all that was on Tech Meme. At the top. So if you're wondering if you're going to see more of this, my guess is yes.
Ooh, sorry, let me turn off the magical hello sound. Yeah, 23 million views in 6 days is pretty good. This is the
not bad.
MacBook Pro announcement.
And they get to be the number one tech story 3 days running, which is pretty smart.
I think so maybe there's a vote for this. This is a good, and as a reporter, it's probably easier for everybody, yeah?
Once a day, yeah. Especially
a lot less filler.
Yeah, like especially when like those of us who only get like one at bat like per day or whatever. It's like, okay, so here's an announcement with three different products. All of them are kind of interesting. None of them are a blockbuster. Which one do we sort of give short shrift to, and which one do we declare I'm going to spend most of my word count and most of my attention on this? So it's nice that we can talk about things like, hey, wow, look, there is now 16 gigs of system memory across the entire line, or hey, look, finally for the first time we've got that new glare coding display on the MacBook Pro. Like all these little details that kind of like maybe would not have borne a great mention. And yeah, we don't need a big circus for every single event. I think that it's great when they do it for something like Apple Intelligence, where they really do have to tell a major story and lay the ground and lay expectations correctly. But when it's like, yep, these are three really, this new Mac Mini is really nice. Hey, wow, this new processor, the family that's coming to the MacBook Pro, that's a real big boost forward. It's nice to be able to space these things out and not treat it as though we need to roll out all the dogs and ponies just for a simple but interesting news story.
I did find myself by the third one, every time the person came up with talk about Apple Intelligence, I was like, oh, I can skip over that.
That's somebody who did a lot of work, was the woman who has to have every single video has a lengthy Apple Intelligence demo. If you were not sure if Apple was pushing Apple Intelligence enough, were they.
By the third one, I was like, okay, and I can just skip over this, and it was nice not to have to sit through.
So the chat room wants to know, Alex, how many Mac Minis did you buy?
I have not bought any of them yet. The problem is I don't know what I need yet. And I have a lot of Mac Mini. I have
translated.
I mean,
he hasn't found a client to buy it for him.
Well, yeah. I mean, there has to be a reason for it. Business. I mean, I know I sound like I just buy hardware willy nilly, but it's usually connected to a job.
Yeah.
so I don't have. I think we are looking at. Actually, I'm potentially going to. Do something where we have just turn one of them into an encoder, which looks interesting to me. But I probably will end up getting one of the base units to do some testing. But I have these M1 and M2 Mac Minis, and they are super fast. And and here's the thing is I use them. I use them sparing. I mean, I use them for different things, and they all do what they do as fast as I can imagine them doing them. And so it's not really. And I have a Mac Studio, which has a lot more I/O. So I don't know. Right now I'm trying to figure out where I would put it or what I would use it for. But as soon as I have a good excuse for it, I'll probably buy one.
I think this is the quickest I've ever felt like I bought the Mac Mini with the M4 Pro, and the next day they announced the M4 Max. I mean, admittedly, it wasn't a surprise, but that's 24 hours to regret.
I will say I'm left with, I know it's going to be another 6 months, but I've been kind of like, if the Minis and the Mac Pros are this fast, MacBook Pros are this fast, I really want to see Studios and Pros.
Yeah, the Studios will be
Ultras.
Yeah.
Right. They'll be, I think it's going to be complicated. I do think that the challenge that Apple has is the problem that I'm having is that the hardware is outrunning the software in the sense that there's not many applications. If you're not doing 3D, if you're not doing some heavy lifting, there's not many applications that give you a reason to buy a new Mac. It's just that these have jumped so far forward that numbers is going as fast as it needs to go, and many of the games that you can buy are going almost as fast. Sure, they don't have ray tracing, but most people aren't going to notice.
But they do, don't they? Now have ray tracing.
I'm saying the new ones have hardware accelerated ray tracing.
For those who aren't watching the video feed, that was twice that Alex used air quotes around the
ray tracing.
It's kind of like there's a lot of things that are hard to render, and when they say we have 4x anti-aliasing with global illumination, you have my undivided attention. Ray tracing is okay. We've been doing that for 20 years. So, Alex, it's fine.
Alex makes a good point that a lot of people I've seen complaining about, like, they still compare this stuff to Intel. And they
or
do,
the M1.
But they also can compare it to the M1. And I think this is one of the reasons why. First off, Apple Silicon is so good that even if you have an M1, you probably don't actually need to buy an M4 anything because it's that good. The Apple Silicon era is so strong. And then the second thing is, we computer nerds overassume how often people replace their Mac hardware. And there is still, one of the reasons Apple keeps comparing things to Intel, it's not just to make Apple Silicon look good, although it does do that. It's because they know how many people are still on Intel Macs. And so they're still trying to sell them on coming over to Apple Silicon. And they're like, all right, well, you waited till M4. Now's the time, right? But they know it because I've heard from a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, I'm still using an iMac from 2018, or I'm still using a MacBook Pro from 2016. And like, I don't live like that because I'm a tech nerd and a tech journalist. But a lot of people, like, a computer's a big, expensive purchase, and they make one and then they use that thing for 8 years, and they still need to be convinced.
And I may have to start traveling a lot again, so I may actually get a new MacBook Pro at some point. But I have an older one, a 2020. It was like the last Intel MacBook. And I had to render something on site. I had an event last week, and I had to render something on site. And I'll just open up the laptop and open up Motion. It was this countdown clock, but I'd done all this 3D countdown clocky things inside of Motion, and it renders in about 4 or 5 minutes on my Mac Studio. And I figured, maybe it'll take 15 or 20 minutes. I was 2 hours. It was 2 hours. Like, it was not like a little slower. It was unusable. Like, I was like, well, I'm going to live with what I have. I mean, it was a minor change, but it was like, I figured, I'll just throw this in, and no, you can't do that. So I think that it is dramatic. I mean, especially now that you're getting to these M2s and M3s, M4s, and M5s, I guess, next year, the Intel machines are, I mean, I try to explain to people, you have no idea what's on the other side of just any upgrade at this point. Yeah. I was surprised to look at, like, when these new ones come out, I always go look at the, like, Walmart, and Costco, like, have they dropped the price? No. So the M2 Mac Minis are still $20 less than the new ones. So, wow. Yeah, it's a weird thing, but they'll drop it
out there with one of them price guns. Fix that.
I mean, honestly, if you've got a laptop, I know that people have different buying philosophies, right? And some people are like, well, I'm going to buy a nice one and then use it for a long time, rather than buying a less nice one and using it for a little time. And I think that's a valid way to go. I will say, though, that you could get, for $999, you could get an M2 MacBook Air today that would also completely blow away your Intel laptop, whatever it is. But yes, I also understand that maybe you want a MacBook Pro. The screen is amazing on the MacBook Pro. I love the MacBook Air, but like, there are lots of reasons to get a MacBook Pro. And yeah, you're probably going to be more comfortable about using that for the next 8 years.
For me, it's that, like, now that if I have to go out and actually do work in the field, then I will actually use up the computer. So of how far I could go, especially because I've learned how to make Motion crunch my Mac on any of them. So that's been, and that was hard for a long time.
So I did purchase a Mac Mini.
Which one?
I held off as long as I could.
You get the big one, the little one, medium one?
I got the biggest one I could get.
Whoa. That's a lot. That's like $5,000, like $4,700.
No, it wasn't that bad. So maybe I didn't get that. I mean, it was $27.99.
Yeah, so that you didn't go all the way with the hard drive and the.
No, I got 2 terabytes. You could have got.
Once you go to 8 terabytes, things.
But I got I didn't do that. Rich. I got 64 gigs of RAM. I got I got the one in the bottom below the fold. It
is funny.
And then I upgraded the chip, so I got the M4 Pro with 14 CPUs, 20 GPUs. I got 64. I maxed out the memory, 64 gigs, and then I got 2 terabytes. That's pretty max. That came at $27.99. That's pretty max. I mean, the only thing I could have done is gotten 4 more terabytes, and yes, that gets it up to $45.99. But I figured with Thunderbolt 5 and 2 terabytes internal, I'm probably okay.
The thing is with Thunderbolt 5, I might be tempted to go back to 1 terabyte, or definitely not more than 2 terabytes like you got, because the problem with Thunderbolt 4 was that it did max out at half the speed of the internal drive of the Mac Studio, at least. And so, but theoretically, you should be able to get RAID systems now that are running as fast as, well, I mean, technically, they could be running as much as 15 gigs a second. I think that'll probably be more like 8 to 10, but that's twice the speed of the 5 gig per second that the Mac Studio, the original Mac Studio, runs.
Well, and there's another point, which is that the store in Sequoia, I don't know if it happened earlier, but will let you install large applications to external drives.
Right.
So suddenly I don't have to put everything on that internal drive.
I don't find that I don't think applications really take up all the space. For me, it's camera files.
Yeah.
That's
well, and that doesn't matter. You could put that on an external drive.
Well, I couldn't before because it wasn't fast enough. Like
speed.
If I take 6K raw files from a Blackmagic camera and throw them onto a external drive, I can't edit it at full res. Right. I mean, I have to build proxies, and there's a whole bunch of issues with that. And so you being able to have an external drive system that can do as much as 10 terabytes a second is important for video editors. Again, it's not for everybody. I mean, there's a lot of people that is not going to ever be a problem. But if you're a big part of Apple's market are video professionals, and being able to take their raw files from their cameras and be able to edit them without having to go into proxy mode is useful.
Here's the settings in the App Store. Download and install large apps bigger than a gigabyte to a separate disk, and then you can choose the disk. I don't know. I think that's good for, you know what? That's for games is what that's for, because they tend to be 4, 5, 6 gigabytes. This Valheim, I think, is almost 5 gigabytes. So,
curious to see if this turns out to. I know that there's been a lot of talk about it becoming a gaming platform.
Yeah.
Somebody put that out, right? There was an article that says
Mark Gurman.
Gurman.
Yeah, I was kind of like,
not only that, but there's some people say, well, finally, Apple produces a competitor to the Xbox. I'm like, no. It's like it's nice that like AAA games. It's nice that it's nice that like the most demanding and most graphically challenging game on the AAA market on PCs is coming to Mac next year. But if you think that people are going to be buying a Mac instead of an Xbox, something that is...
Well, if you love Death Stranding, you're set, man. Or guess Cyberpunk's coming next year, right?
The problem is I'm sure that they're porting it in a clumsy way over to the Mac, and they're not... Yeah. If you wrote these games, if you actually went through the trouble, and I personally think Apple should pay someone to go through the trouble to do this, and went through the trouble of 2 or 3 years of actually optimizing for the hardware and optimizing for the operating system and taking full advantage of it, you'd probably find that the games run 3-4 times faster than an Xbox, at much higher levels, at much higher quality. But you'd have to optimize everything to do that, and that would take a lot of money and a lot of time. It'd be tens of millions of dollars to do that.
And it's really not. It's really only worth it if they're going to be putting investment in gaming. It really is only worth it if they're putting the money in places that are going to create more App Store transactions, because that still is the lion's share of the money that they make from the App Store. Like not only games as the largest segment, but also in-app transactions from those games. So like it's a prestige thing, and it's certainly nice to have that in their portfolio if they have, again, really good like AAA games ready. But really, if they're going to really be planting seeds for later harvest, they're going to want to make sure that whichever one has the most monkey-like press the button, get a banana pellet feedback loop for in-app purchases, that's the kind of stuff they're going to want to put money into.
Well, they already have those on the iPad and the iPhone. I mean, that's the majority of games on the iPhone.
Better banana pills is what
part of it, though, I think gets back to Apple needs a reason. I mean, they've built such powerful hardware that they need a reason for people to buy that hardware. And games are a big reason to buy faster hardware. Gamers are the ones that have the fastest graphics cards, the most, they build their own systems.
PC gamers for sure.
PC gamers. And so the thing is that I think that beyond in-app purchases, which I do think I agree with Andy that are important, I think that there's a push for, I think what Apple needs to do is get people to put things on their computers. I mean, this is the problem with the iPad. There's nothing on my iPad. I have 2 iPad Pros. I haven't gotten the newest one. Why? Because there is nothing that is going to run any faster on my iPad than what is there right now. And so that's the challenge. And I think that Apple needs to find more. And that's where video comes into play. That's where 3D comes into play. That's where heavy scientific calculations and games. There's not many other things that need that kind of hardware.
So Gurman's analysis is very weird, and I think we've said this before. I really admire Mark Gurman as a journalist who's got sources, and his reporting about Apple future stuff is impeccable. Sometimes they put him on the spot and they ask him to be a pundit, and I He doesn't
this
always
is punditry, right?
Yeah,
this is not from a source.
It's complete punditry, and I think misguided, because he's sort of like, oh, Apple can make this thing into a games thing, and anybody who's lived 5 years, let alone 25 years of Apple trying to do games, knows that Apple doesn't understand games at all, and any gaming that Apple is successful with is accidental. And in fact, you could argue maybe it's best if it's accidental, because if Apple tries, it fails. But if they don't try, they sometimes succeed anyway, despite themselves. But that all said, I will say this: Apple's experimentation with their game porting toolkit stuff that they've been doing for the last couple of years,
isn't that interesting?
Suggests to me that they are making an effort to basically make it easy for people who are building PC games to get them to run on Apple's platforms. And if they keep at it, if you look at some of the other groups that are just like random open source groups out there, like the people who are trying to get PC games running on Asahi Linux, right? That I think that there is a path forward, but again, it's not Apple spending money on titles and getting like 3 titles that are AAA from 4 years ago to run on their platforms. I think it's that if they keep pushing forward with a gaming toolkit to the point where they can say, look, if you're building a Windows game, you can also sell it on the Mac. Here's the sales figures. You will get an incremental 5%, 10% revenue boost, and we've made the tools so easy that there's almost nothing you need to do. Right. If they could do that, I think that you could get in a scenario where Mac gaming is essentially PC gaming. And other than, I know at the high end where you've got high-end graphics cards and stuff, it's never going to be that, right? But it will be compatibility on Steam and in the Mac App Store and other places that they want to do it. And I do think that that's a smart gaming strategy for them, because it's not hands-off, but it's literally, we're going to push our platform up to be equivalent to the work you have to do for Windows, and no more extra work than that. Yeah. And then you do you. We're just making it so you can be on our platform without a lot of effort. And that's similar to Steam doing it with the Steam Deck, right? Where it's not Windows, but they've built a compatibility layer that lets you run those Windows games on the Steam Deck. It's a similar kind of thing. So that I find encouraging, because it's not Apple's usual game nonsense.
Is it as easy to write to Metal as DirectX?
I don't know, actually. I don't know if it's as easy. I do actually think that for dollar for dollar.
Red, from Anthony Nielsen, Project Red's blog, says that their version of Cyberpunk 2077 will not be available on older Intel Macs, will require Apple Silicon, and will, quote, take full advantage of Apple Silicon and advanced technologies of Metal, including Metal FX, the upscaling that is the equivalent of DLSS.
I think the game porting toolkit is doing a lot of translation stuff, where they're translating your Windows stuff into Apple stuff instead, and that because of Apple Silicon, they have the ability to have pretty good. And I mean, what Apple says is you can't just click a button; you need to do a little bit of performance work. But again, if the amount of work you need to do is less than the extra revenue you're going to get for being on another platform, then it makes sense for game developers.
Yeah, and I think also, I don't know if it's easier, but I do think that the dollar for dollar, the new Mac, like M4s and so on and so forth, at the same price would probably outperform a PC doing the same thing. If the GPU, CPU, and bandwidth and memory bandwidth is a big deal when it comes to texture maps, oversampling, lots of frame rates. All those things are things that it is actually probably capable of doing better dollar for dollar. You can probably build a PC that's better, but not.
We are seeing
the thing is, it's not necessarily.
Go ahead, Andy.
I'm just saying that that's not necessarily the most important thing. A lot of the reasons why some of the most popular games is because they are designed to run on a piece of spit with a diode in it. I mean, it's you can build a $500 PC that can run a lot of the most popular like team games out there, and that's the whole reason why they became a popular team game. The problem is that it's not something that is on developers' minds that if we really want to seize the bull by the horns, we're going to have to target Mac. Because my goodness, we're leaving a whole bunch of money on the table. I agree with what Jason was saying. I think that's very, very smart. That if Apple is doing something very smart by basically trying to say that we're not going to fund your game studio $2 million to port all of your games to our platform. We're not going to even try to make cuddle you and wine and dine you and convince you that you should be giving the Mac platform day and date with all the other platforms. What Apple can say is that whatever amount of effort you put into porting your game over to the Mac with our tools that we've given you, it's going to be outstripped by the amount of money that you're going to make by selling that on the Mac platform.
Exactly.
So I think that's a very, very sensible thing to do. If Apple decided to have a new game czar whose entire job was to start game studios and co-invest in EA and making sure that Madden is perfect for the Mac, I would think that that's kind of a fool's errand, or at least not the most efficient way they could be spending their money. But by creating that Windows translation layer, that was brilliant stuff for them to do. It's exactly what they should be doing, and I hope it pays off for them.
What is Apple's natural market for the Macintosh? They've kind of given up on pros a little bit, right? They don't have gaming.
Only at the super high end, and they never had gaming. Part of it is ecosystem. Part of the reason that the Mac has been so successful, more successful than it's ever been in its history, is because of the success of Apple's other products. That it started with the iPod, and certainly with the iPhone, you've got this thing where people are exposed to the Apple brand and they like it, and then Apple says, well, it's better with a Mac than a PC, so maybe you should get a Mac, and it's simpler and it's nicer, and so some of it is niceness and luxury, and there's some of that it just works quality to it as well, and it's the industrial design and the software and the ecosystem, and there's a lot of stuff at play. But I do think that Apple has built the Mac to the size it is based on it's nice to have an iPhone and a Mac and have them all work together.
And I think that for individual content creators, it's still pretty popular. Among
photographers,
them,
sure,
yeah, and they sure. I think that Apple,
a lot of creators,
artists.
When we work with creators, we see some PCs. It's definitely a handful of them, but it's a pretty Mac centric and iPhone centric world. There are people who, once they start building a system, they read a bunch of books and they get a bunch of PCs to do their editing and so on and so forth. But the reality is that, especially if you're doing Premiere, a PC is better. I don't think Premiere runs very well on a Mac, but you have a very large contingent that are using Final Cut and Resolve, and I think that those are, and so I think that in that world, and I think it's leaned back. I think Apple did fall behind for a while. Like the Intel, I think, was really holding them back. I think that a lot of times we felt like in the 2010s that you could get more performance out of a PC, but there's a lot of individual artists who don't want to deal with PCs, and so I think that that's a big part of Apple's market, are people who are in spaces that are less than 5 people or individuals, and they just don't want to do the tech support that's required on a PC that is different than a Mac. It's not that a Mac has no viruses, but it is easier to administer. For an individual.
I agree with you, and I agree with Jason. I would say it's ecosystem and inertia, because once you go Mac, it's just agreeing with you, Alex. You just stick with it, right? Very few people go the other direction.
I think that for me the problem is I get a PC, and if I don't have the enterprise version on that PC, the first time it updates and breaks a bunch of things, I'm like, I can't use this for production. I just immediately just go, I gotta, unless I have somebody else to manage this for me, I don't want to deal with it personally. So I think I have PCs sitting in my system right now, but I don't put them in anything that I deal with on a day-to-day basis. They're kind of little pieces of glue, and they're usually really tiny ones or a really big one that I'm using for Unreal. Yeah. But having them everywhere means that I'd have to deal with updates all the time, and that is stressful in production.
I will mention, because I waited to the end of the day and made a BTO order, it's November 20th is the delivery date. Ernesto on our YouTube says he ordered his Mac and it's coming the 19th. So I think the 8th might only be for certain models in stock, kind of thing. Do you think these are real, these benchmarks?
They're usually real. They usually match the finals. There's somebody who's running
Geekbench.
So I think the way it works is if you don't pay for Geekbench, things get uploaded without and like you have to pay, and people don't pay, or people don't know what they're doing, or people get access and they do know what they're doing. But we've seen this for a while now, that some devices get out there in the field and those Geekbench numbers get uploaded to the Geekbench browser. And so generally, I think they have been proven to be right.
Well, in that case, if you bought a MacBook Pro with the Max, you should be pretty darn happy. This is the highest, somebody said, the highest number on a Geekbench single core test ever, and a remarkable performance. and pretty good on the multi-core.
And remember,
too, right?
this is not the Ultra. This is not the Mac Studio. This is not the Mac Pro.
Imagine what an Ultra will be, which is normally it's two Maxes, right? Two Maxes make an Ultra.
And another thing to keep in mind, this is not running on like a desktop PC with a 1,000-watt power supply. This is running on a mobile computer. That's pretty damn impressive.
And you look at the memory throughput. Again, those are the kind of things that when you're talking about games and video and 3D, the memory throughput on these systems is outrageous. Like, it's an outrageous bus system.
Yeah. So good on you if you got yourself one. I would love to hear from anybody. Nobody's got it yet, I guess, Friday.
Looks like it's going to be pretty good in the Pro. We were saying this last week because it was something we saw in the Mac Mini is the Pro seems to be taking, because M3, the Max took a big leap, and the Pro just kind of was incremental. But the Pro this time took a huge leap. The Pro chip, that middle chip, that was
that's the one I got on the Mini, because you can't.
Yeah, and I talked. I think I can say that I talked to some people at Apple without getting into details because they're very iffy about this. But I talked to some people who do chip stuff at Apple, and not behind the scenes, just in a briefing, and they seemed really excited about that number, that the memory bandwidth in the M3 or M4 Pro is 75% more than it was in the M3 Pro. Wow. That is a number that doesn't usually go up by that amount in one chip generation. But I do think it's partially because the M3 Pro was a half step, whereas the M3 Max was a big step. And this time what we're seeing is they've all taken a little half step forward, but that M3 Pro to M4 Pro has taken the big step. And that's why even some of those preliminary numbers and just looking at the specs, the Mac Mini and MacBook Pro, if you go up from the base chip to the Pro chip, it's substantial. Now, obviously, the Max, you're getting double the GPU cores, right? Like, there's a lot. If you do stuff that's GPU bound, you should get the Max, right? Because it's so many more GPU cores than the Pro. It's not even close. It's a no-brainer. But if you're just kind of a regular person who's not going to spend the extra money on that, the Pro is really looking like it's going to be a huge step forward from wherever you're coming. Cool. M1, M2, or Intel.
Let's take a little break. There's still quite a bit of stuff to talk about. You're watching MacBreak Weekly, the premier show for Macintosh users, with Jason Snell, Andy Ihnatko, Alex Lindsay. Our show today brought to you by Veeam, V-E-E-A-M. I'm thinking every time I talk about Veeam that there are people listening who really should be listening hard. Your data as a company is the most valuable asset, right? Without your data, your customers' trust turns to digital dust. That's why Veeam's data protection and ransomware recovery, bell should go off there, ensures that you can secure and restore your enterprise data wherever and whenever you need it, no matter what happens. This is more than backup. This is data resilience. As the #1 global market leader in data resilience, Veeam, V-E-E-A-M, is trusted, this stat should blow you away, by over 77% of the Fortune 500. Trust Veeam, 77% trust Veeam to keep their businesses running when digital disruptions like ransomware strike. Those are the 77% you don't see in the headlines. Oh, they got paid ransomware fees. They lost all their customers' data. No, because Veeam lets you back up and recover your data instantly across your entire cloud ecosystem, wherever it is. In fact, in most cases, Veeam will stop the ransomware before it bites you, proactively detects malicious activity. Veeam also does something really important, something I hope you're doing, but Veeam will make it easy. Remove the guesswork by automating your recovery plans and policies. You have a recovery plan and policy, right? I think a lot of people just go, my plan is to just hope ransom doesn't happen. And if it does, by the way, you'll get real-time support from Veeam's ransomware recovery experts. Look, data is the lifeblood of your business. Protect it. Get data resilient with Veeam. Go to Veeam.com to learn more. V-E-E-A-M. Veeam.com to learn more. We thank Veeam so much for their support of MacBreak Weekly. And you support us too when you go there. And if they ask you, say, hey, I saw it on that MacBreak Weekly show. We like that. Let's talk 6 colors.
Yay! It's a me, color man.
It's a me. Quarterly revenue by category. iPhone less than half this quarter.
Yeah, look, don't worry. Next quarter it'll be more than half because it's the holiday quarter and that goes way up. This is basically what the numbers have been all along. Half of Apple's revenue roughly is the iPhone, and then these days a quarter of it is services.
Look at services. Look at it growing.
And then wearables, Mac and iPad are in the just below 10, and that adds up to 100. So. That's how the way to think about it is wearables, Mac, and iPad are about the same, and then there's a quarter services and half. Like wearables, Mac, and iPad share the other quarter that isn't.
Now I do notice that a couple of years ago, Q4 revenue was like much higher. Why is revenue diminishing? I mean, Q4 is the big revenue quarter, right?
No, Q1 is the big
Q1 is
quarter.
okay.
This is a record fourth quarter for Apple.
It's
boring, but it's a record. They have kind of reached a new plateau of their overall revenue. So there it is a Q4 record, slightly up from last year, which was presumably a Q4 record because they do that a lot.
There's also an anomaly this quarter because remember that in early September, the EU court decided that, Apple, you do owe 12 to $13 billion.
That doesn't go to revenue, but it goes to the profit line. The profit line's $10 billion less than it would have been. Also, the chart you were showing when we were talking about that was Mac revenue, not total Apple revenue.
Oh, okay. That's why I was confused.
And the Mac hit a real high 2021 with Apple Silicon and the pandemic, and has come off of that high a little bit. It's one of the rare Apple products that doesn't kind of hit a plateau and stay there, but I think it's because it was such a huge number of Macs sold during the pandemic and also the Apple Silicon transition that it was hard for them to maintain that level of sales. But they have come down to a plateau that is higher than they were when before the pandemic a little bit. But it's still, biggest Mac market ever, essentially, but not the biggest sales. Those were in like 21, basically.
Continued rise in services revenue.
Yeah, down a little bit. Its rise was down a little bit, but it continues to rise. It's double-digit growth.
It's up 12% instead of 14% last quarter.
You're not gonna sniff at double-digit growth anywhere, and the services just keeps going up. Wearables is stalled though. That's an interesting one. Is that the wearables home accessories category, which is primarily driven by AirPods and Apple Watch. It's just kind of flat. It used to be it really expanded and was a reliable growth source for a while, and it's reached this point where it's 25% of Apple's revenue, and now it's just kind of sitting there. So I don't know, the reasoning is that flagging Apple Watch sales, is it that they didn't update AirPods for a while? I guess we'll see. Certainly not the Vision Pro. So I guess we'll see.
Vision Pro is in there, but it probably doesn't make much of a difference.
Can't imagine that it does.
No. Wearable revenue down 3%. Here's the total revenue, and it does look good. Yeah, it's a good Q4. Good solid Q4.
It's on the plateau. And then again, we're expecting, I think they even guided to essentially a record Q1 holiday quarter, or at least better than last year's holiday quarter, which wasn't quite a record. Yeah. Which is what Wall Street always wants to hear about. What's next?
I do note that your line, your average is pretty flat. It's not like revenues.
No, this is what that's plateau. Big geography fan. That's what happens, and it's actually happened historically. Apple goes through these moments where they have inflationary growth, and then they sit there for 2, 3, 4 years at that level. Now, the bad news is if you're a Wall Street type, you want it to keep going up. The good news is they don't give it back. That's, I think, one of the interesting things about Apple building its business is they have these moments of growth and they don't hand it back. Like the next year, it's still up a little bit. And then the next year, maybe it recedes a little. And then the next year, it's sort of flat. And then eventually what you want is that, year 5, year 6, it does the big uptick again. And then finds its way. What you don't, because a one-time success, like we saw with the Mac a little bit in 21, is nice, but what you want is the tide is gonna rise, and then it stays at that new tide level. Right. That's a really nice thing for their business. So yes, from a Wall Street perspective, their business is kind of flat, but I would say from a what's the health of the business perspective, they had huge growth, 3 years ago, that they've entirely held on to.
Yeah,
and they have built a plateau near the top of Mount Everest.
Yes.
It's kind of like there's the air is starting.
Yeah.
air is starting to get thin. You know, like up there, you got to wear packs. You know, you got to really think about your
profit.
So it's the fact that they plateaued is in growth is something, but it's an enormous amount of money. Like,
profit in the fourth quarter is $14.7 billion. This is interesting. The gross margin is almost 50% margin. I mean, they really are extracting every penny out of everything they sell.
Yeah, now keep in mind services margin, and I think I have a chart to this extent. Services margin is a lot more than product margin.
Close to 100%, I'm sure.
But yes, Apple is a very high margin business. It always has been, but it's never been more than it is now because you've got, in addition to their high margin hardware, they've got the impossibly high margin services business.
Yeah.
The stock was down like 1.5 or something when the market reopened the next day. But that's if there are a lot of reports about how investors are disappointed, it's for the usual reason, not because they're not doing really well, not because they're not hugely profitable, but because they didn't beat the estimates that these analysts had for them for that quarter. And it is, I mean, it's if anything, it's just a show of faith from investors, and that wanes and webs depending on the month. So who cares?
Year-over-year growth very good in China and Europe and the Middle East. America is a little bit down, but
but again, you know, they're coming off that high. When you look at it this way, it looks like there's a big thing and a plunge. But again, that's a growth rate. So they had the big growth rate, and now they're kind of like in this flat period. And if you're an Apple investor, which I'm not, and I'm not allowed to be, but by myself, because that would give me
you
again
have no boss.
I've never invested in Apple, but I know a lot of people who follow this stuff do. What I would say is the question is, when is that next growth spurt coming? If it is, and I'm sure that's what Wall Street is focused on, is what's the next thing. And we know that there are reports, and that Apple has even kind of hinted at big plans in the iPhone product lineup. Mark Gurman said like a folding phone and a super thin phone that might come next year, and they're trying. I think it's very clear, like they want that next iPhone super cycle where there's a really new iPhone that kicks them into a higher gear. And, we'll see if they can.
That seems less and less likely to me.
I know, right? But I would have said that before the last one, too. I honestly would have said it before the last one. And it is a question, is that all driven by new hardware, or is it also that the iPhone replenishment cycle just goes like that?
Well, I'm sure they were hoping Apple Intelligence would be a big driver. Yeah, that's unknown yet. We don't know yet.
And they've said that'll take a year, basically, for them to know if Apple Intelligence... They acknowledge that Apple Intelligence isn't going to sell a lot of iPhones today, but they're hoping that it will sell a lot of iPhones over the course of the next year or two.
That's why the Q&A during these is so interesting, because it gives you a reflection of what are analysts really interested in, what are they really worried about, and what are they kind of betting Apple's future on. For instance, in recent earnings calls, Apple would have to answer a bunch of questions about China because they're getting unprecedented amount of competition from Huawei and other Chinese local brands. I think this time they didn't get any answers whatsoever. It helped that their numbers were already up. They seem to be battling that problem very, very well. But so many of the questions were about, can you give us any color, any indication about how Apple Intelligence is going to affect future purchases of the iPhone? There are also questions about the differentiation now between the iPhone 16 Pro and the iPhone 16, and are you learning anything about where people's level of interest is? And of course, they didn't have a lot to say of substance about it, but mainly repeating the, to be honest, accurate thing where they're saying we're rolling this out in stages. We don't expect any real bursts of interest because of that, but we are going to have a product that is not going to be AI complete for another couple of years. Right. So that we don't have to really answer that for now.
And it's not just function. I mean, those of us in the U.S. especially, and in the English-speaking world, can focus on the fact that Apple Intelligence, right? Like first wave was 11.1 or 18.1. Second wave will be 18.2, which will be out by the end of the year. And then there's going to be an 18.3 and an 18.4 and an 18.5, right? And this is a whole year-long thing for features. But the other thing to keep in mind is 18.1 is U.S. English only. 18.2 adds Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and UK English. And they're saying that next spring they're going to add a bunch of other languages, which will bring it into, I think, China and the EU and some other places. So it's not just because Apple's a global company and the iPhone's a global product. This isn't just a feature functionality rollout. It's region by region rollout, which is not right. Like we're so primed to Apple just makes it available everywhere on day one, which they didn't used to do. But this is very Tim Cook right now. They make enough and they are everywhere immediately. Not the Vision Pro, but like the products that matter are everywhere. But not Apple Intelligence, and that means that the iPhone rollout now is kind of regionalized, at least for this one selling point. So that is a total change, and they acknowledged as somebody who does a transcript of it, which means that I need to sit there and listen to every word that comes out of it. Even though I use an AI transcription, I have to verify it because there are plenty of mistakes in that AI transcription. I sit there and listen to it, and they spend a lot of time saying, it's going to take time. And Wall Street needs to understand Apple Intelligence, they think is going to be a growth driver for them, but it's not going to be like flipping a switch. It just isn't.
Yeah. So many of their questions were about Apple Intelligence, including how, I think that was the second time in a row they got the question of how, if they're going to be running a lot of their models on Apple Silicon in their own servers, like how is this going to affect capital expenditures? And once again, they said, well, it's hard to, a little bit of a shimmy duck saying that, well, the thing is, like, it's not like we buy a computer and that's what we run something on. We do stuff that we own. We do stuff that we basically buy compute from. So it's hard to say. However, we don't really think that it's going, we've already been spending for the past 3 years. We don't feel as though there's going to be a big burst that's going to affect our bottom line in the next several quarters.
Plus their secret sauce is that they're running on device, which means it's your electric bill that goes up
exactly.
Instead of their electric bill, which is brilliant. Actually, the distributed computing thing where they've got the chips that can run a lot of these models just on device. And so that is a fact. They also said, I don't know if you caught this one, Andy, people were like, so Apple Intelligence looks like really hard. This one, I love those analysts. It looks really hard. Are you going to have to spend even more money on R&D to make this hard stuff? Yeah. And the response was like, they didn't say it this way, but basically it's like, yeah, but we killed the car, and all of that money that we spent on that is going to go into this. Essentially, they're like, there are other projects that we have, we're taking, we're taking.
We freed
but
up
it's very
some
clear
budget.
that was their answer. Is like, look, we spent a lot of money on a lot of research in the car project, and a lot of that's just going into AI.
I mean, that's what can I just quickly say before you go, Alex. This is what I'm going to really miss about Luca as the CFO. He has a way of saying, yeah, we feel as though we gave you those numbers already in the answer to that question. And there's a little bit of that, I don't want you to feel like a piece of garbage right now, but it would not be inappropriate for you to feel like a piece of garbage for asking such a stupid question.
But Luca gives and Luca takes. Also, sometimes the analysts will say, Luca, I noticed, for example, this happened, I think, last quarter. I noticed that your margins are at an all-time high.
Yeah.
And Luca's response was like, yes, I am so glad you noticed that. They are, right?
They are, aren't they?
It was like gold star for you, analyst.
Nice job.
So Luca Maestri,
that.
Apple CFO, is getting turned, as we said, I think a few weeks ago, he's turned into a pumpkin. He like gets an office and he gets to focus on one thing. It's like this semi-retirement thing we talked about where they want to hold on to their execs and not just let them go straight to the golf course every day, only 3 days a week or something. So Luca Maestri, this is his last time on the call. I'm sure that he's trained his replacement well to do a similar thing with gold stars and occasional shaking of the finger, wagging of the finger for bad questions.
Sorry, and the hard is Apple's number one. Hard and simple are Apple's two big moats. That they do things that are hard, and they do things that they make things that were complex simple. And I think that they're doing both of those with Apple Intelligence to some degree. Like that. To the level that they're successful at those two things, it'll be a good business for them. But I think that it'll be really interesting to see how much they leverage. They have the advantage of building the OS and building the hardware. And there are obviously other people doing AI solutions on chip to distribute some of that out to the computers. Although it's going to be really interesting to see. I think that we're going to end up seeing Qualcomm capitulate to ARM because there's got to be a bunch of people out there telling Qualcomm, like, you're going to set the whole industry back 5 years, other than Apple, if you don't figure this out. Because I don't know if you guys are watching that intently, but ARM canceled their agreement with Qualcomm. Like, it was kind of like they can take you to court, but there is this legal way without a court saying, hey, we're not going to let you do this anymore. It's hard to get out of it because it's in the contract. They can just give them 60 days notice. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how that goes. But assuming that gets itself sorted out, Apple, I think, still has a pretty big advantage because of the vertical nature. And I think Apple keeps on leaning into that. We're going to keep on building vertical systems because that's what they're good at. They're not good at heterogeneous systems. It's just not. It's not in their nature. So,
any other color from the earnings call that you want to add, or should we?
Not much. They did. All what I wanted to say was that there were a couple of interesting, hard questions that they got. One being that, okay, basically there is one candidate who might be elected who wants to tariff the crap out of every industry. And as a company that has to import stuff from outside the United States, are you worried or planning about that? And Tim, almost explicitly said, yeah, I'm going to take a dive on that one.
Yep. Yeah, no, he had two questions where Tim was basically like, nope, not going to answer. And one of them was, is if Trump does tariffs, because it's easy to say, oh, well, Trump's talked about tariffs, so what if? And what Tim Cook's not going to say is, we did 4 years with that guy, and we brought him to, we managed him, right? Like, we managed him, and we made it work. And if I need to do that again, I'll do that again. But he's not going to say that out loud. But we know what happened when Trump was president last time. Is Tim Cook showed up at the White House, and he took Trump to the Mac Pro factory, and they negotiated
use our facility for your PR thing. Absolutely.
Because at the same time, like, there's the tariff story, but also there's also the Apple is one of our great American companies stories, and that requires diplomacy. And Tim Cook is 4 years ago, they said he's a master of diplomacy with China and with the White House, and like, he has to deal with this stuff. I also want to mention the other one was somebody asked, what about the DOJ and Google and all that money you get from Google? And his response was like, I'll save that for another day. Okay, Tim.
Which is a big deal. Yeah, it's a big deal because if they lose $18 billion in services, maybe services no longer looks like the shining star that it once was. So
it's fair to say, though, it will be a while, and Tim can probably pass that on to John Turnus or whoever his successor is. Let him worry.
Could be.
Sundar Pichai's big statement on it is slightly troubling, but maybe absolutely correct for a CEO, saying, not saying that, well, we're right, they're wrong, or B, we're on the right side of history. His big statement, especially to investors, is, this is going to take years and years and years to litigate. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
I think I actually said it during the earnings call last week, too.
Yeah. We actually talked about this a little bit on Sunday, because we had Amy Webb on, who is kind of a very high-level management consultant. She's a futurist, but she's brought in to talk strategy with the Department of Defense, with CEOs. And I did bring up Tim Cook as kind of, I think, the perfect example of how to manage an uncertain political situation. He was in China the same day India, and they announced that they're going to be making many, many, many iPhones in India starting next generation. And he's very good at balancing these conflicting things. She compared that to somebody like Elon Musk, who has made almost Pascal's wager, if you will, with the election, saying, well, let's think about this. If Harris gets elected, she's not going to retaliate for me being a Trump fan. If Trump gets elected and I were endorsing Harris, that could be a problem. So the wise thing to do is support Trump just in case, and knowing that even if Trump doesn't win, it's not going to be as damaging if I did the opposite. And so that's another way to do it. I'm glad Tim's not doing that, because that seems a little bit cynical.
And just, it should be said that Elon Musk is not just hedging his bets; he really is all in and committing his entire platform. There's so much upside, and this isn't a political.
But he knows that that he will get. If Trump wins today, he will get great rewards for that. But he also knows there will not be a big punishment for it if he doesn't.
But Tim, let's give credit where it's due for Tim. He is really, really good at balancing those things, at keeping his hands clean while shaking his hands with people who have a great power to hurt Apple and to hurt his employees. Yeah, and this is not we're not just talking about what's going on with tariffs, but what's going on with manufacturing. Also, remember that Apple Intelligence is not going to work in China unless Apple reaches a deal with a Chinese-owned AI company to provide basically the AI for that. And that's another very, very delicate thing that, had it not been for 10 years of groundwork he's been laying down there, he wouldn't have the credibility and the good relationship to rely on. So the fact that he makes the government looks really, really good, no matter what that government is really, smart. Really an asset to Apple. I will say that, and people who've been listening to the show for years and years and years know that there was a time where I'm like, I hope we don't find out in a bad way that Apple doesn't have a line they're not willing to cross, like when they're told to get rid of VPNs off of an app store or get rid of these podcasts that this government doesn't like. They seem to have danced on the right side of that for now. I guess what is going to happen is, let's hope things don't get so tense that we actually find out where that line is. And I have faith, but it's hard.
Yeah. Well, and Amy, of course, has been doing a lot of work in the last couple of months with CEOs. We live in a very uncertain time.
Absolutely.
And her motto was embrace uncertainty, and plan for variety of outcomes, but you've got to think strategically and you've got to plan it. I think no one does a better job at this than Tim Cook. I think you got to give him a ton of credit. Go ahead.
I just want to say one thing. We always talk about what Steve would do. Steve could not manage that.
Oh no.
Like this
Steve was all visceral, all emotional.
He'd just be yelling at people, and he'd be, and I.
Tim's almost the opposite.
Yeah, I think that I think there's a lot of things that Steve would have done that probably would have continued to grow products and so on and so forth. But this crazy management of all these governments and rules and everything else, I think Tim Cook was built for.
Yeah, they began a 4 a.m. email from Steve saying, I have some thoughts on the size of that yellow star on your flag. It is disproportionate to the rest of that flag. And I've got the suggestions. Yeah.
All right. Let's take a break. I do want to talk about Apple Intelligence because we have it. And Gurman says we're going to get the next tranche December 5th or thereabouts, which isn't very far off. You're watching MacBreak Weekly. Andy Ihnatko, Alex Lindsay, and Jason Snell. Our show today brought to you by another group of experts, Experts Exchange, experts in all things tech. And I want to say this, it's very important to me, human experts, people like us. If you are looking for answers, if you are looking for support, if you are looking for information and guidance, you should join this network of trustworthy and talented tech professionals. You'll get industry insights and advice from people who are actually using the products in your stack instead of paying for expensive enterprise-level tech support that may, frankly, not be as good. Experts Exchange is the tech community for people tired of the AI sellout. They're ready to help carry the fight for the future of human intelligence. And you know what? Only humans can make a community, and that's really what Experts Exchange is, a community of professionals in over 400 different areas: coding, Microsoft, Azure, AWS, DevOps, and on and on and on, cybersecurity. Unlike other places, duplicate questions are encouraged. There's no snark at Experts Exchange. Just people, experts helping other people. Their contributors are real, and by the way, not just contributors, but users in general. They're all tech junkies who love graciously answering all questions. You may be an expert in one area, she may be an expert in another area, and you can meet together and help each other. One member said, I've never had GPT stop and ask me a question before. That happens on EE all the time. And I really want to emphasize this because there's so many other places that might seem the same, but where you go and you get snark, you get put downs, you get, we've already answered that, or often you'll get, oh, don't do it that way, do it my way. That's not Experts Exchange. It's a helpful community that really loves doing what they do. And they're committed to a community where human collaboration is fundamental. Their experts directory is full of people, many of them in our community, like Rodney Barnhart. He's a VMware vExpert, a Security Now fan. Edward Von Million, you've seen maybe his YouTube videos. He's a Microsoft MVP, ethical hacker, really smart, really knowledgeable. And I can go on and on. There's a long list of experts. Cisco design professionals, executive IT directors, and more. Yeah, you can get kind of higher level assistance too, like how do I deal with this? Management help. Other platforms betray their contributors by selling their content to train AI models. Not Experts Exchange. Your privacy is not for sale. They stand against the betrayal of contributors worldwide. Experts Exchange has never and will never sell your data, your content, your likeness. They block and strictly prohibit AI companies from scraping content from the Experts Exchange site to train their LLMs. Their moderators strictly forbid the direct use of LLM content in their threads. People at Experts Exchange know that the supreme reward for attaining expertise is the fulfillment you get, the satisfaction you get passing your knowledge on to help someone in need. Experts deserve a place where they can confidently share their knowledge without worrying about a corporation stealing it to increase shareholder value. And humanity deserves a safe haven from AI which will BS you. Hallucinating AI. Join Experts Exchange today. Get 90 days free. They know, okay, maybe you're a little on the fence. You don't need to give them a credit card. You get 3 months free. At least do me this favor and do yourself this favor. Try it. No cost to you. e-e.com/twit to learn more. Experts Exchange. They've been around for a long time. They want you to discover or rediscover them, and they're going to give you 3 months free to do that. e-e.com/twit. Thank you, Experts Exchange, for supporting the show. And thank you all for using that URL so they know you saw it here. Experts Exchange. e-e.com/twit. I have to say, now that I've been using, I have Apple Intelligence on all my devices, turned it on last week, got it very quickly. I'm starting to kind of think more highly of Apple's staged rollout. I think if they had dumped a lot of features on us, a lot of them would be missed, never used. It might be too much for people. It's very subtle, but all of a sudden I'm getting replies in my pretty good replies in my text messaging. Frankly, I love the notification summaries. I think they're very useful. I used to just turn off all my notifications because it was overwhelming. I love it that, we showed it last week, 5 to 10 people have rung my doorbell instead of one for each, person at the door. Or that was good on Halloween, by the way. Or your garage door has opened 23 times. I like that. I think that's a good feature. I have to say, I'm kind of coming around. I haven't used the summaries much, but I think that's also putting simple, straightforward, easily discoverable features in to start seems to me the right way to go. Agreed?
I think so. Yeah, I think it makes sense. And I think that, again, I don't think Apple's in that much of a rush. I think they can roll this stuff out. I mean, I have ChatGPT and Midjourney open most of the day, doing different things. And I've been playing with Claude, and I don't feel like I'm waiting for Apple. My life is stopped because Apple doesn't have those features. And so I don't, so I think that they can kind of roll these out relatively slowly and really build that out. And I think that that's going to be that's going to be a huge advantage for them. Because they're able to think through it in a way that I think a lot of the other developers can't. Everyone's racing against each other to such a degree. Apple has the ability to kind of go slow. The thing that I show everybody, and this has been on the Android platform for a long time, is you open something in Photos and get rid of things. It's crowd pleaser.
Yeah, because everybody has a photo with some body or something in it that they want to get rid of.
I was just saying, and I used to do it in Photoshop, and I was like, you
were a wizard.
I take things into generative, and I will say that Apple's version of it is not as good as Photoshop's. I mean, it's cute, but for little things, like I shot something yesterday, I had to send someone. There was a paint can in it. It was in my shop, and there just happened to be a paint can. I was like, I don't feel like having that there. Just kind of clicked on it, and it disappeared. I was like, okay, here we go.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's just amazing.
I think.
I wonder if,
go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I wonder if this is an area. I do agree that Apple don't have to go fast. They're not in a situation where people are going to stop buying Macs if they don't have AI features built in. The industry is still trying to convince people, trying to make the case to people of AI features that are actually useful and practical, as opposed to make for a great demo or a good white paper on something that you should be very, 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 very worried about. So they have time to do this. What I'm kind of interested in is whether Apple has kind of the guts to move forward on AI. I was kind of concerned when Craig Federighi talked to Joanna Stern on the Wall Street Journal last week or the week before about the AI, the Apple Intelligence rollout. And he was talking about, we're concerned about the truth of an image and should we be doing this? Like all these philosophical questions. Whereas I think it's definitely part of the conversation we need to have about what's the danger of making images and videos so easy to change. Nonetheless, again, if I took a picture of my kid and I accidentally made it look like there's a palm tree growing out of their ear, it's great to be able to remove that palm tree. It's really great to be able to remove that paint can. It's really great to be able to be in a group photo by taking the group photo, then switching yourself out with somebody else standing in a new place and now being able to combine yourself so that now you are in the group photo as well. There's going to have to be a lot of stuff where Apple might have a moment where they have to say, we can't allow these purely academic discussions, philosophical questions, direct the amount of features that we're willing to put into our products, because it could be that there is a good argument to be made on both sides and it turns out to be a product that people really, really want. So that's the thing that kind of concerns me.
Yeah, I think that the issue is you don't want it to come out too early. Like you need other people to make the missteps. I mean, there was a lot of stuff when I was on Call for Help with Leo. I had this thing where people could send photos in and I'd fix them, right? So I would, people would send these photos.
This is, by the way, 20 years ago.
20 years ago. It's hard to believe. And so people would, I'd get 100 photos a week, would get sent in, and I'd pick one that I would do. And invariably, every week, there would be some wacko that would send one in and he is weird looking and he's got this girl and he wants her to be comped in. He's like, this is my niece. I want to be comped into the photo with her. And I'd be like, I should report you, but I'm just not going to do the photo. Like I'm not going to do that.
You never told me this.
It was like this constant flow of weirdos who wanted to be comped in with girls, and the thing is that now you can do that seamlessly yourself. And I think that Apple, I think it takes, I think that it's not that you can stop that, but I think that Apple doesn't want to be the first one. Like that needs to be something that we're going to let everybody else take those, let everyone else be in the front line, and we're going to sit back and let everyone take those arrows, and then we'll roll in and do it slowly and maybe more thoughtfully, or put some guardrails in, watching what everybody else is doing. It's kind of what was it? What was the Tom Cruise movie where he keeps on he keeps on doing it over and over. They changed the name of the movie.
Edge of Tomorrow.
Edge of Tomorrow,
Die, Repeat.
Live, Die, Repeat.
They changed the name of the movie.
Yeah,
sort of.
Yeah, they did.
For
they
highlighted. Reasons. It's a great movie, by the way.
Yeah, I liked Edge of Tomorrow.
I've watched it so many times.
Oh, you know what? That explains it. Because I said to my wife, "Oh, look, there's a new Emily Blunt Tom Cruise movie I haven't seen." We started watching it. She said, "You've seen this," and I felt like I was in it because it was a repeat of the movie.
I think I've seen it as many times as he's gone through the cycle, and so I just start where he wakes up on the base, and then I just watch the rest of it. And the Act 1 is like, nah, whatever. Anyway, so the you need to see it once. You need to see Act 1 once, but once you get to Act 2, it's good. Anyway, but but I feel like, it's all that like trying to figure it out. Like Apple gets to just watch everybody cycle through those things and make all those mistakes and then figure out, where could we put guardrails that make it at least like we did something reasonable, because everyone else is in such a rat race to compete. They're throwing caution to the wind and they're just saying, yeah, we can make you can do anything you want. And that's, problematic. Yeah.
I was going to mention, it's absolutely true that Apple is doing this in part piecemeal because they have to, right? Obviously, they're catching up. They're running as fast as they can, and you could argue that if they could have shipped all these features at the moment, they would have, but they couldn't.
I'm glad they didn't.
But here's the thing: I think you make a very good point, which is, I think dropping a load of features, hundreds of thousands of features on people in a single release. Back in the Mac era, where it was like, the Mac was the thing Apple did, and it was 2010 or whatever. And you're all computer users, so you're going to get your new features. I could sort of see it, although it was overwhelming even then. But today, where you have a much more diverse user group. You've got a lot of low-tech people who have a smartphone, and they're not like, oh, I just love noodling around on my Mac, and I got new features to noodle around with. They're like, they have to learn it, and then they put it in their brains, and then they don't change, and it's very hard for them to glom onto any new features. If you dump your year's worth of features in a single go in September, guess what? Probably every feature drop, every version drop you do, there's like a 10% chance that they'll discover one feature. So you should, I think, for usability reasons, you should probably drop 5 features or 3 features or whatever every couple of months, not 100 features at once, because I think if you drop 5 features or 100 features, there's still only that % chance that they're going to pick up one of them. So why not? It's like we were saying about the Mac. Why not do 3 Mac events on 3 separate days and get 3 chances to get people's attention? I feel this way with all software. Like, you can ship 100 new features. Nobody's going to learn how to use. They're not. None of us have the capacity for that. So in that way, I think that by accident, not only is it an advantage because Apple can see how everybody else is dealing with AI rollouts and adjust on the fly, because the advantage of being a little behind is that you don't have to learn those lessons, just like Tom Cruise in that movie whose title keeps changing. But you also have the luxury of kind of like spoon feeding it to your users and saying, why don't you try this? And their ads are like this too, where over time their ads with use cases will change, because that's one way you convince somebody to try a feature is you actually do an ad.
You have to show it.
And I could, don't get me started, I think a lot of Apple's Apple Intelligence ads are real bad, but I get what they're trying to do, which is lead people into those use cases as well. So I think they would not have chosen this method, but I think it's the right one. I think it's better for users.
And I think who else does it? Google does it with their Pixel phones. They do monthly Pixel feature drops. Yeah. So they probably have them all done, but they roll them out a little bit at a time, and that way you can absorb it.
Exactly.
They're titrating
because it's overwhelming, and it suppresses upgrades if the features. Apple learned this with iOS 7, right? Like if you drop dramatic changes on your device in a single go, people stop updating their phones. Like after iOS 7, there were no updates for a while for a lot of people, because they're like, Apple completely pulled the rug out from under me with this OS change. So, and Apple wants you to update. So instead, parcel it out very carefully. They do this with emoji too. That's one of the reasons they don't ship the new emoji set with the 0.0. They wait a couple, because it will eventually become a FOMO thing where you're like, oh, why are you using an emoji that I do not have? And then you get that emoji. And Apple Intelligence features, and generally features, I would argue, Apple's been moving this way, but I really like that idea that in June they say, here's what we're doing for the next year. And then that's a promise to roll all these features out over the next year, but not all in September. Please just don't do it.
Yeah, I'm always surprised at how my kids know so much about the phone. Like they'll show me something every time they grab it. They'll be like,
"It's just kids."
Oh, here's how to actually,
Dad, don't you know that?
The kids these days. I mean, but
aren't you on a show called MacBreak Weekly? How could you not know that?
I know exactly. Well, it's mostly obviously it's the phone that they know really well, and I think that to Jason's point is that there are so many features that are hidden into these things at this point, and I think I would love for Apple to go as slow as possible, because I find that there's so many things that aren't as stable as they used to be. And there's that whole like I kind of want a snow leopard cycle where Apple didn't feel like they had to add a bunch of things, because they could probably use a year to tighten things up.
But slow and steady is not bad. Slow and steady.
Yeah.
For all of us, right? It's for their, I'm sure for their developers too, right? I mean, this is one of the reasons why this happens, not just for Apple Intelligence, but for lots of stuff, why Apple started doing some of this is, imagine being an Apple OS developer and being told that you need to get every brand new feature to fit and finish final for September. Instead of being able to triage and say these features in September, like we've been saying about Apple Intelligence, these in 0.0, these in 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, that's way better. And the software quality is going to be better. And like all of it is better to do it this way. So I love that in some ways Apple being behind sort of forced them into this. And I hope they do this next time too. Like obviously you want the cutting edge, most important features that are going to sell iPhones to be there at launch. And I'm sure they will try to do that next year. But it's okay if some of the stuff waits a little bit. That's fine.
Right.
And the great thing is that they don't, as they demonstrated, they don't have to come up with the entire story on their own. They can roll out Apple Intelligence in 18.2 by saying, anything that we're not studly enough to be able to do with AI, Apple Intelligence, we'll let ChatGPT do that. We'll let you leak out for that. And if you want to use something, use another service, another app on our phones, we are more than happy to host Gemini or Claude or anything else as an app on the phone. So they don't have, all they have to do is put themselves in a position where they're not getting in the way of whatever AI people want to use. Because again, we're not in a place yet where people know exactly what they want. It's a really good thing to have AI that's deeply, deeply rooted into the operating system, so that like when you're using the Google Assistant or if you're using Shlomo, it's just suddenly turbocharged with smarts. But we haven't demonstrated yet that people necessarily require AI that's built in at the OS level, that the people who want AI will just simply pay the $20 a month and install Gemini or install ChatGPT. The ones who don't care about it, they're happy of having wacky custom emoji generated for them from time to time.
Let's take a break. When we come back, a big acquisition by Apple, leaving the future somewhat uncertain. But first, a word from 1Password. You know 1Password. I know you know 1Password, but we're talking about something more than just a password manager now. We're talking about a brand new thing from 1Password they call Extended Access Management. Let me ask you a rhetorical question because I do know the answer. Do your end users always work on company-owned devices using IT-approved apps? Sorry, of course not, right? They bring their own devices. They bring their own apps. Sometimes their own apps are on their own devices. So how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged devices and apps? 1Password has an answer to this question, something brand new they put together called Extended Access Management. And I think you're going to really like where this is going. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device. It solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. To understand this better, imagine your company's security like the quad of a college campus, that beautiful green lawn with a nice brick paths leading from ivy-covered building to ivy-covered building. It's perfect, isn't it? Except if you've ever been to a college campus, you know there's more. There's little dirt paths leading from building, the shortest point from building A to B, the ones the students actually use. Those perfect brick paths and the beautiful ivy-covered buildings, those are the company-owned devices, the IT-approved apps, the managed employee identities. And those paths that people actually use, those are the unmanaged devices, the shadow IT apps, the non-employee identities like contractors. Here's the problem. Most security tools just kind of ignore the muddy paths. They only work on those happy brick paths. And of course, a lot of the security problems take place in the shortcuts. An employee brings his own laptop in and there's, an out-of-date browser on it or an unupdated version of Plex on it. And how do you protect yourself against that? Well, 1Password Extended Access Management. It's the first security solution that takes those unmanaged devices, all those apps, and the identities and puts them under your control. It ensures every user credential is strong and protected. Every device is known and healthy, and every app is visible. It's security for the way we work today. So if you're a company already using Okta for authentication, you add 1Password Extended Access Management. Now you know not only are the employees who they say they are, but their devices are secure, their browsers are up to date, their operating systems are up to date, and so forth. Available for companies that use Okta. Also now Microsoft Entra, and it's in beta for Google Workspace customers. So no matter how you authenticate, you can add 1Password Extended Access Management. Check it out. 1Password.com/MacBreak. That's the number 1, PASSWORD.com/MacBreak. You know 1Password, but I want you to get to know something interestingly new for enterprise. 1Password Extended Access Management. We thank him so much for supporting MacBreak Weekly. And don't forget to use that address, 1Password.com/MacBreak, because that supports us too. Kind of a shock came out of nowhere. This week, Apple bought Pixelmator, makers of Pixelmator Pro, Pixelmator for iOS, and the Photomator apps. much beloved apps. I loved Gus Mueller's take. He's the guy who does Acorn.
Yeah.
And he says that I didn't realize this. In fact, it kind of surprised me that Pixelmator and Acorn came out roughly at the same time, 15 days apart in 2007. And since Affinity, which makes Affinity Photo and Affinity Pages and all of that, was purchased by Canva in March, Acorn is the last independent Mac image editor from that era.
Acorn is the cheese.
I like Acorn, and I used both. They do different things. And he says, yeah, there was a lot of overlap. So what's happening? Is this a acqui-hire? Or is Apple going to bring back Aperture? There are a lot of questions. What are your thoughts on this?
I don't think they're bringing back Aperture. I mean, I think that this could be incorporated into Photos. It could be its own app. It could be, there's a variety. I mean, when we saw, there's other things they've bought that they've absorbed into other apps. There's other things they bought that they let stay kind of where they are. I think it'd be a great addition to some of these other tools. We talked about this on Office Hours a little bit. I'm not that excited about paying another subscription. Like, it's not like, I don't think that would get me into
and Pixelmator was not a subscription, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it
was
was
an
$50
option.
and you got it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was an option.
But there was an
to
option. Okay.
Yeah, if you wanted to do it that way, but I think but you could get it for $50. I bought both Acorn and Pixelmator Pro or whatever, or bought it as they were released. So I didn't, I've had them since then. I think the purchase of Affinity probably put a fair bit of pressure on both of those apps because suddenly they had a lot more money, and Affinity had done a better job at being more Photoshop like. So it was so it had a couple features. I used Affinity mostly. I used Pixelmator for a long time, and that used to be the standard thing that was installed onto most of our machines at PixelCore. I moved to Affinity for two reasons. One is they had this very odd 360 painting tool that the other one, nothing else had. So that was one reason. And they added TGA with Alpha at my request. Nice. And so there was because I couldn't find another thing other than Photoshop that would export TGAs. And I admittedly went to Pixelmator and said, hey, I really need this export. And they're like, oh, it's not a big demand for that. And I was like, okay. And so anyway, and Affinity put it in. And so a bunch of us all moved to Affinity because it was finally a non-Photoshop tool that would export stuff we needed for Blackmagic switchers, and so.
But that is a unique use case.
Yeah, well, when there's a million switchers.
Speaking of
there's
image
a million
erasing,
switchers out there. That's a thing.
Pixelmator was one of the first to put image erasing in. I was really blown away by how well it did a few years ago.
I mean, I think that the big thing is that they by not being constrained by the technical debt that Photoshop had, there are so many of the plugins that Pixelmator does and that Affinity does and that Acorn does that are much, much faster than if you do it in Photoshop. Like, you can do them in real time in a way that you can't do it otherwise. In the same time, I don't think what's interesting is I actually don't think that Pixelmator is at the pro level is really that competitive with Photoshop. It doesn't have alpha channels, doesn't have, a lot of the other things. So it's a great app for Apple to get without getting, I'm not sure what Adobe thinks, but I doubt they look at that as something that's digging in deeply into their bottom line, and so I don't think you're going to get a change, a reaction from Adobe by buying this. And I think that it would be an incredible tool next to Keynote or, being able to add.
That's what I was hoping is that they would add it to the iWork.
That's frankly. What if they did that and made it part of that thing, I think it would be a much better solution than if they started charging us a subscription for it.
Yeah, but
Gruber points out Photomator integrates with Apple Photos.
Right.
It does very well.
So there is something to be said for making that be, part of the Apple Photos.
My gut feeling, Photomator, it's funny, Photomator's been doing AI replace like cleanup in Photos for years now.
Right.
And it was frustrating that it wasn't in Photos. It's got some nice tools. My hope is that the stuff that's been going on with Photomator maybe puts some people on the Photos team and get some improved editing tools in Photos. But Pixelmator, that's the question. When I initially, Apple can do this two ways, right? And my initial thoughts were, oh, they're just going to eat this thing, and
Right. That's my fear.
and we're never
Right.
going to see it. I actually think Pixelmator is so advanced and there's so much of it that I actually have a hard time imagining that they would just swallow it whole and we'd never see it again. So here's my best guess now is this, and this is just a theory. I don't know anything about this, but what matters to Apple? The iPhone. What matters the most about the iPhone to Apple? In many ways, it's photography. So I think maybe there's an argument that Apple camera technology and the people involved in Apple's camera stuff are very ambitious. And in the end, whatever they build, however ambitious it is, it has to integrate with their consumer photo app.
Yeah.
Because that's all they got. And it makes me think maybe somebody said, can we have a more advanced photo editing app as part of our Apple software that doesn't force us to toss every last thing we do into Photos? Could we have something, because we have Final Cut. We can toss things in Final Cut. We don't have to toss them in iMovie. And now those are across platforms. Could we do something a little more advanced than Photos? And they looked around and said, well, actually we could, and that maybe that's what motivated this purchase is they want a platform for a Photos Pro or Pixels or whatever they want to call it that allows them to have something like Final Cut and Logic for photography that's not Photoshop and it's not Lightroom and it's not trying to be, but that lets them say, and if you want to do X with this new amazing future iPhone camera feature, we have the app for you that you get for free or for a subscription price or whatever. So that right now, that's my guess, is that something like Pixelmator will stick around in some form, and that maybe that's why Apple cares so much, is that there's a part of Apple, which is the iPhone and photography, that Apple actually really does care about. And once you start thinking about every photo feature you add has to get stuck in Photos, a consumer image library and light editing app, it is actually kind of a mismatch. And if they built every feature for iMovie, you would be saying the same thing. So that's what I think now.
And this is what makes Pixelmator unique. I'm not going to compare it to Acorn or others. I'm going to compare it mostly to Photoshop, because if you're just talking about is there really, really good there's the built-in photo editor you get. There is the intermediary thing where you're still pretty much just sliding sliders around and you want to use AI features. And then there's Photoshop. And Lightroom will give you that. Photoshop will give you that. It's not even that expensive. I think it's still just $10 a month if you just want those two apps. Owning a company like Pixelmator will do is that Pixelmator is something that Adobe products aren't. It is down to the DNA. It is a Mac app. It is an iOS app. There is nothing about it that seems like there was any quarter given for making this multi-platform. It was just if you could even think of it as the most florid demo of every single Mac technology there is, down to Metal, down to the APIs, down to user interface, everything. It is an elegantly Mac product. So I don't know why Apple necessarily would want to own it as opposed to be happy that it exists and keep promoting it in their keynotes as they would like to do. I would be shocked if it were, hey, we could really make the Photos app spectacularly great and steal all those really great AI features. Of course, we'll throw everything else. We're not going to actually have the app itself. I don't think they would be stupid enough to do that, and I don't think that the Pixelmator team, unless that would be a hell of a big truck filled with the sort of banknotes that are only in like Ripley's Believe It or Not, the kind of like the $10,000 William Friedkin note or whatever. That's how much money they would have to do to say, oh, we're willing to basically put our product in a basket and send it down the river.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's a price. I'm sure that there is a price for which that they might not care. But I think you're right. I think the counter might be, could Apple take pieces of it and put it in Pages and Keynote and Freeform? And like Freeform is kind of designy a little bit, but I don't think it's the right fit. I think the right fit is to do a really good photo app. And if you haven't used Pixelmator, like it's Photoshop, basically. It's got layers and it's got vector tools, and it's like way beyond, like Photos, the app could not contain it. It doesn't make sense. Photomator is like nice features that should be in Photos. Pixelmator is Photoshop. So now Apple has a Photoshop that, as Andy pointed out, 100% right, is very Apple-y. It is the most Apple-y.
Yeah,
so,
that's why Acorn, with all respect to Gus, Acorn isn't going to get acquired because it's so not a Mac.
Well, it's
a one-person shop, so it's
I love it, and I use it all the time.
It's an old-style Mac app, whereas Pixelmator is like a Mac and iPad and iOS, like cross-platform in Apple's
like
platforms.
Apple made it. Yeah,
it's also, and that's another reason why it would confuse me if Apple did not continue to support it as a separate product, because it's not just, hey, wow, it's photo. It's now, instead of just pushing sliders around in the Photos app, now I've got like something that's almost Photoshop-like. It's not just Photoshop-like. It goes off on its own direction. As Jason mentioned about the vector tools, it's not just for, hey, I want to increase the brightness here. Hey, I want to do layers. Hey, I want to delete something from the background. It really is a 100% independent creative tool. So as its own thing, it is a natural fit for Apple's portfolio, particularly if they make a kick-butt iPad version of it. It is such a great way to show off all the technologies that Apple has been investing in for years and years and years, including the AI tools that they are, like as we discussed earlier, kind of not philosophically excited about putting into the mainstream camera app or the mainstream Photos app. They could still offer all that sort of stuff with this free app that you can download alongside iWork. Again, it would be such a damn shame and such a damn disappointment if they did not simply continue it as Pixelmator, or even if what they did with it was, again, give it a new name, but it's still clearly Pixelmator. There's still the Pixelmator group that's updating it, only they now have access to the silicon. They now have access to, oh, by the way, here is what the GPU on Apple Silicon in 5 years is going to be able to do. You get to start supporting it right now, and you get to start telling us what this hardware should be doing now. I mean, I hate to, I'm not going to go so silly as to think that, gee, this would be a great step towards having a touchscreen Mac, wouldn't it? But that's as far as I go. But the worst thing absolutely would be, oh, great, there's a Pixel. I can recognize the bones, the blood splatter evidence of Pixelmator's acquisition in this one new feature that's on my iPhone.
I think that one of the things that Apple could have been looking at is, hey, we need to have more control over. There's a lot of features that we'd like to take advantage of with Apple Intelligence, with all of the data that we're talking about computational photography. Apple, has a lot of data connected to those photos, and nothing's really taking full advantage of those right now, other than Photos, and probably that's still kind of hidden under a veneer of consumer interfaces. And so I think that Apple could have been looking at this area, and they could definitely build their own team and do this, or you could buy a team, buy a company and have the team there. And I think that there's a lot of value in Pixelmator being able to integrate with Keynote, integrate with Pages, integrate with being able to add USDZ, features to it, being able to do those kinds of things. Because one of the things that Adobe's actually pulling away from Apple on is the ability to generate high quality 3D assets. And Apple, that's a big deal for a lot of what Apple's doing with AR and VR. But Adobe is crushing it. And why are they crushing it? Is because they bought Algorithmic. So they bought one company that brought Adobe had a bunch of failures for a decade, gave up and bought this great company out of France that really brought all the tools they needed into it, and they just keep on leveraging that end over end over end. And they're building like simplistic now. Project Neo is this simplistic modeling tool that you can grab onto and start to build stuff. And so I think Apple needs those generation, because they need to control. Apple likes to be able to control its own destiny, and with Final Cut and Motion and Logic, they control their own destiny in those areas of. It doesn't mean that everyone's using those, but they have somewhere they can push that technology into it and at least prod people forward in that area. And so I think Pixelmator fits that bill as far as in a still image, vector image, that type of thing, being able to do that. So I think it's a great purchase. I don't think they're going to tear it apart. I think, I think that you could see a bunch of the features that they have fed into it, but just those features, I think Apple could write themselves. I think that having the apps themselves, I think, is useful.
Yeah, they have a professional video and film editing tool. They have a professional audio editing tool. It makes sense for them to say, I want to have a professional static image generator tool. But it's not, as you say, it's not just necessarily 2D images. Again, the thing that keeps, the thing that Adobe does that keeps its hooks into me, that guarantees that $10 or $15 a month for me for the photography package is, so now if I have a piece of art of a flying toaster, but I'm thinking, oh boy, I wish it were head on instead of 3/4, it will turn it into a 3D object, and I can now spin it and have a straight on version of this 3D toaster, even though I didn't have to turn it into a 3D object myself or give it any hints. That's the sort of problem solving, and I don't have the skills to do this myself, but hey, I've got $15 a month for this Photoshop, and it's got a brand new feature that dropped last month. Yeah, if Apple can do things like that, if they can make it so that anytime I want to do advanced asset creation, I hate to use those buzzwords, but that's the best way to put it, because I don't want to start the thought that, this is just an Adobe Photoshop alternative. It is like an asset, a creative asset creation thing. Anytime I'm in Keynote and I need an object to dress this thing up with, either generating it with AI or editing something that I already have, or drawing something brand new, or transmogrifying something, it has such slick integration with something like Pixelmator that's the tide that will elevate all creative boats on the Mac and on the iPad.
Apple's relationship with Adobe has been tenuous. For a while, Apple was, in the Steve Jobs era, was really very anti-Adobe, right?
They weren't kind of anti. I think they were really frustrated with Adobe, because what the problem that they had is as they moved platforms, Adobe was taking a long time, because Adobe has an enormous amount of technical debt inside of their apps. And they've been slowly taking those sections out and updating them and everything else. But it's not trivial for Adobe to move Photoshop or Premiere or other things to a new platform. There's a lot of stuff that's based on things. And Adobe is also managing multiple platforms. And Apple is just one of them, there.
Right.
And I think what Steve Jobs got so upset about is he would release a new OS and Adobe would tell everyone, hey, don't upgrade, if you're using our products, because we can't. And then it would go for a year. I think at one point it went for a year where and I think that's when, it was either 6 months or a year that it took Adobe to get Photoshop to the new version. And that infuriated.
But then at some point, Apple realized Photoshop is critical to the platform. Probably why it abandoned Aperture, right? They didn't want to compete head to head.
I don't think Aperture was particular. Maybe it was a competitor to Lightroom, but it wasn't ever really a competitor to Photoshop. I think that what happened was, I think there was a push to make photos have a lot more features that got a lot closer to Aperture, and then it gets to a point where why do you have
both? Now they're going in the other direction, and I have to say that Pixelmator and Photomator are good choices because their user interface looks a lot like Photos. Yeah. So I think maybe Photos Pro is a very interesting
idea.
Everything
they did down to their website, right, looks like an Apple website.
Looks like Apple.
They as a company, and there are some companies, not all in the Apple ecosystem, that are like this, where they're like, we're just going to try to be Apple. What would Apple do? Is the touchstone in every way. And if you get bought by Apple, that's kind of good, right? Because you were already there. And so, whether it's Photos Pro or whether it's Pixels or I don't know what, that would be, if I had to guess right now, that would be my guess, is that they will keep it intact in some form, sort of like what happened with Workflow when it got bought and turned into Shortcuts.
Right. And by the way, the team is in Lithuania. I don't know if that makes a difference, but
I think Apple's Apple's third-party apps are in, I think the Logic team's in Germany, right? They're all over the place.
Okay.
And if you're not in Core OS, you can afford to not be in Cupertino. So I think
what happened to Logic is the perfect example of what could happen to Pixelmator.
I think Logic and Final Cut were both purchases, and they left the teams in place. And the Logic team was in Germany, so they're still in Germany. And I mean, they may have developers elsewhere, but I will tell you, it's very clear from their release notes that there are a lot of Germans still building Logic because they're like, occasionally I see some English that I'm like, that looks a little like a German speaker did that. And also, again, very meticulous and detailed. The best, I don't say this often enough. The best release notes in Apple software are Logic's release notes.
Very
they are detailed.
Yeah.
It's every change. Every time I see it, I think, imagine if everybody's change notes were like this. It's so, I mean, it's like BB Edit level, where it's literally every change that happened.
There was a small corner of a button that we didn't like, and we softened it.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. This menu item, once called this, is
we
were that.
during a night of tense sleep, we were visited at 4:32 a.m. by the ghost of Steve Jobs, saying, "I have a note."
Yes.
on the rounded rectangle that you're using in here.
That's hysterical. I love it. Well, I'm really rooting for the Vilnius team. I'd love to see them make this more than an acqui-hire, but really a product that Apple could add to its kind of suite of free apps that it provides with every Mac and every iPad. That would be really amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they could do it as a subscription, right? Like, because Final Cut and Logic are subscriptions, so they could do it that way if they wanted to. We'll see.
You know, the new Apple Watch has a bigger screen. Maybe we're going to finally get great photo editing on the watch.
Pixelmator watch. That would be pretty funny. That would be hysterical. All right, let's do it. We've deferred it long enough. It's time for the Vision Pro segment.
What do you see? What do you know? It's time to talk the Vision Pro.
Are we disappointed with Ming-Chi Kuo's Zeet? Yesterday saying, as I understand it, production of the cheaper Vision Pro has been delayed beyond 2027 for a while now. That means Apple's only new head-mounted display device next year will be the Vision Pro with an upgraded M5 processor. Credible?
I don't think it's changed. I think they have this thing like Apple is discovering this thing, and Apple's going to go to its AR, and Apple's going to do these things. I think Apple's been on the same path the whole time, and I think they're just talking to different people. Like Apple's decided to make a cheaper one, and Apple has maybe never decided to make a cheaper one next year. Like, you know, like it. I don't know if it. I really.
Well,
I
for
think
people holding out for that, it's good to know, or maybe not. I don't know. They don't.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, I think that I like the idea that they understand the difference between a $3,500 VR headset that has that people can't figure out how they would use it, and a $1,500 VR headset that has no great apps for it and no great use case for them personally. Like it doesn't solve the problem. I think that they know that if there's the problem with Vision Pro is not price of access. It's that, again, why would you spend in a world that has the MetaQuest? What is your reason for spending more than $600 or $700 on a headset like this? And unless you're an enterprise, unless you're doing laparoscopic surgery, there's not a whole lot of great answers to that. So if that's true, I like that idea. Let's upgrade the processors because we got new processors so that whatever job it's doing right now, it continue to do very, very well. But I would love to see Apple if there's a really new version of the Vision Pro, I would love to see it be the obvious residue of Apple having learned from their sales experience over the previous 2 years, as opposed to, we just need we need to have one in pink and green, and then that's the reason why people aren't buying them. No, it's not that really.
According to Gurman, they do have a initiative codenamed Atlas, which gathers feedback from Apple employees on smart glasses. They're looking at the existing market. And this is Gurman's sources who say additional focus groups are planned for the near future.
But at Apple, focus groups are 4 or 5 years from a product.
Yeah, this feels like it's no news at all. Like, of course they would be doing this.
I don't love that the response to the Meta Ray-Bans is let's form a committee.
Let's form a committee.
Like it feels like that. And I mean, who knows if they're also working on it, but I think that's a little concerning to me. I did think it's interesting that Gurman's also reported that Apple might be considering something that is not quite a cheap Vision Pro, but more like you take the compute off and you put it on the iPhone, and it's a simpler device, and it's just specifically what he says is an accessory for watching movies. And I thought that's really interesting, right? Like if we believe that some immersive content and also watching movies on planes is a great feature of Vision Pro, could you build kind of from the other direction something that is not as immersive and it's not as heavy and all the compute is on the iPhone, but that could get you not spatial computing, but maybe a really nice entertainment device, and have that as an experiment in the next few years.
Or even just even a virtual display. Like that is the thing that gets me hooked on these devices. The idea of, again, being someplace other than my house, but still have like my full like multi-screen display. It's something that people keep responding to, and the fact that I think there was another news item about 18.2, excuse me, the next version of the Vision Pro OS finally giving you the widescreen virtual display, which sounds like a trivial thing, but it's like, this is what people like about using this thing. Stuff they love having.
Yeah, you can do wide and ultra wide, and it's also, my understanding is it's a much higher quality. That's just out in the latest beta, developer beta for Vision OS, and you need the Mac OS latest beta. But I haven't tried it yet. I'm looking forward. I need to upgrade one of my Macs to 15.2 in order to get that. But that is, you're right. These are interesting ideas to say, well, what if we don't have every product be everything and slice it in a few different ways? Because again, if they figure out how to do immersive theater or immersive whatever, and you can lower that barrier, you don't necessarily need it to be a full-on Vision Pro computer. It could be a simpler thing that is designed for very limited interaction and just viewing. And using your iPhone as the compute would also help. Sure.
And how Apple would it be for them to not have a pair of glasses that is like DisplayPort over USB-C, but and if you have an iPhone, you can use that as basically, if you have the Mac giving a display through the glasses with the iPhone as an in between, essentially rewarding people who are all in on the ecosystem, and encouraging people who might be considering getting like a Samsung phone instead of an iPhone. Say, maybe you don't want to do that.
Well, I do think that anybody who doesn't think that Apple's trying to find a cheaper version or an AR version, I mean, I'm sure that was part of very early plans of where they're trying to get to. This is a gamma test. It's not even a beta test. This is or alpha test. This is like a
it's also market research. Yes,
but
right.
But they're doing some market research internally. But what I'm saying is the whole thing that some of us have bought is a giant test. 400,000 was about the sample that they needed. Yep. I don't think that they're measuring success or failure based on the number they sold. I think that they needed to get you need them out there in the public and let people play with them, figure out what's working, not working. It's just a giant R&D project, and I don't think they're learning any lessons from the sales right now, because I don't think that they care. Like, I just don't think. I think that they. I mean, I think that they just need a bunch of people using them, and to see what's working, not working, how to get things done. There's so many things that a lot of us are learning because we all own them. So I'm developing things. I look at it. I go, okay, that didn't work. This didn't work. But you have to have, the people who are using it now are people who are obviously early adopters. But and Google did the same thing with Glass for a while, and that didn't work out well because of the camera. But and the type person that would get it first. But it was the idea is you need to get a larger sample than just closed betas, out there and have people using it. I think that's what Apple's doing right now.
Yeah, I disagree. I don't think that they would roll out a $3,500 product that's available to anybody who walks into any Apple store if they did not intend it to be a platform that made sense for the entire ecosystem. I just don't see Apple doing that.
I think they do think that. I just don't think they think it now.
Okay, but and also remember that when Google released Glass, they were explicit saying that, we didn't say this is the next new revolution in computing and wearable. It was like, we think this is a really interesting idea. We've taken it as far as it can go, like inside our labs. We are making a limited number, a low capacity run of these to put it out in the hands of people to see how society responds to these things. This is why we're calling you explorers.
They did very dangerously jump out of a dirigible over top of Moscone and run it in.
That's exciting. That was the good old days when you got. I mean, if you can pay for a skydiver, why not pay for a skydiver?
That was real.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
So many.
But yeah, I think that part of the problem was just that, as we've been saying a couple times during the show, like Apple has at least a 5-year lead time in doing anything. And I think that the idea of a wearable like the Vision Pro made absolute complete sense when they greenlit this project to almost irrevocably go forward. And things changed but not enough for them to say, let's just forget this all happened. It was still a product that they could sell. They figured that we're not going to lose money on a 2024 run of these things, and maybe that will set the ground for whatever we do next. I agree with you that I think that most it's not contributing to their bottom line, but it's contributing to their understanding of how such a product could use. Just one quick thing, tailing back to something we were talking about last week when we were talking a little bit about what might be discussed during the earnings call. We said, they're going to talk about Vision Pro, and I think we agree that it's going to get like one sentence, like kind of under their breath, to acknowledge that it exists. And they said, and we're really excited by what people are using Vision Pro in surgery. Anyway, the Chinese headwinds that we're now featuring. So we did get that one mentioned.
I think that the issue for those of us who have been developing for these headsets for a long time, the thing that I'm most excited about is that I finally have a headset that can get remotely close to what we could see was possible. Like, it's expensive to build that headset, and the Meta Quest doesn't get there. Like it's good, but you kind of like, it's fine. Like, it's the 3D is okay. And if you pick up your phone and do spatial streaming, it's a little better. That it's there. But when you look at submerged, I mean, there are many things about that I didn't like, but that is the highest quality 180-degree stereo footage I've ever seen. And we finally had a headset that could display it, and I think that the impact of that takes years in the entertainment industry to have. But there's a lot of people in the entertainment industry that have these headsets, and they're looking at them and Apple needs to spark that. And there's no way to spark it with another cheap headset that's going to do substandard video. Yeah. You're not going to get people thinking about it because they're used to looking at it. This is the first headset that I've put on that I would prefer if I'm not watching with my family and the player actually works. I mean, like the Amazon player, I still have to watch on TV because the player in the Vision Pro stinks. But if it's a native player playing video, I would rather watch it on my Apple Vision Pro than my TV if I'm by myself. If my family's out. And that is never happened in another headset. And it costs $3,500 to build a headset that does that.
I respect that your opinion. I just disagree with it. I think I see the difference between the Vision Pro and a sub $1,000 headset as kind of the difference between like a Mac Mini and a Mac Pro in the sense that the Mac Pro can get 128 gigs of RAM and system RAM, and the Mac Mini is limited to like 32.
I guess
there's something really important about a machine that can have 128 gigs of RAM, like being able to run these huge models, financial models, scientific models, training AI, that sort of stuff. But I don't think that's something that's relevant to most people. If you're selling this as a consumer item, you're making a very impressive piece of hardware that's impressive in ways that most people are not going to be able to respect.
But I don't think. But what you have to sell first is the content creators who are just tired of everything looking like poop. Like when you put on the headsets and you've worked all this time on this movie and you put the headset on every other headset, it was kind of like, like this isn't worth watching a whole movie on. It's fine, but it's not worth watching a whole movie on. The first time that I watched a movie on the Vision Pro, I was like, oh, I could actually see this as a platform to watch things on. Now, do you have to get the price down? Absolutely. But in the current technology, you can't do it, and you can't get people to build for it if you can't get them inspired to use it. I think that's the challenge.
Okay.
And that's the Vision Pro segment.
Now you see, now you know, we're done talking the Vision Pro.
I'm just waiting for somebody to use AI to either cut that out and listen to only that, or to cut that out and never hear it. But it could do it either way, I'm sure. A couple more quick stories before our picks of the week. Apple's decided to buy 20% of Globalstar, which does the iPhone satellite services. 20%. That's not like buying the whole company, but that's a
$1.7 billion investment. Part of it to $1.1 billion to essentially pre-purchase their usage of the system. $400 million, I think, for 20% of the company, and then also $270 million additional to essentially help them out with their debt. The company has some debt that's due in 2029, and now that's gone. That's amazing. They still. I saw another analyst talk about whether or not this means that Apple will have more of their bandwidth. And it seems as though that's not true. They seem to think that Apple's going to be sticking at about 85% of what the company can provide. But boy, what a huge, huge investment in the idea of this, not simply as an emergency service, but as a way for people to do messaging.
And they're launching more satellites too, aren't they?
Yeah. About 40, I think, recently.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting. U.S. Consumer Finance Protection Bureau has ordered Apple and Goldman Sachs to pay $89 million for early Apple Card failures.
Yeah,
that's things they fixed pretty quickly. I think.
Well, that was a big deal. The complaint mentioned about like 150,000 consumers who just did not get their customer service tickets. Like where if I got a fraudulent charge, I need you to stop this or do something about it, and getting no answer whatsoever. That's not also they accused both companies of you're being misleading about interest payments and stuff like that. So yeah, was a pretty big failure.
Big scoop for the Upgrade podcast, Jason.
I guess somebody sent us an anonymous message that said that Apple is working on 90 hertz refresh screens that would not be Pro Motion, but would be Liquid Motion or something like that. I mean, who knows what marketing name they'll do, but this makes sense. In reviewing the iPad mini, one of the things that really struck me is, as an iPad Pro user, just the slow refresh rate. I really noticed it.
Oh, interesting. Really?
And I know that a lot of phone observers have said that for the price of Apple's iPhone 16, which is still a premium phone compared to Android phones, you should probably have a refresh rate higher than 60.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think this is like the equivalent of Apple holding down the base RAM in systems. At this point, 60 hertz is not enough, I would say. And so this anonymous person who, according to Mike Hurley, is one we've heard from before. Again, we're not really trying to break news, but all of a sudden we did a thing in a podcast and a bunch of people wrote articles about it. So that's interesting. Anyway, this person says that they are working on a 90 hertz refresh and that maybe that will be them raising the bar a little bit on refresh rate on their devices.
Good. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a little break. When we come back, your picks of the week, my friends, prepare them as I beg on bended knee all our fabulous fans who are not yet members of Club Twit to consider spending a mere $7 a month to keep our operation going. We've had to close the studio. We've had to lay off people. We've slowly shrunk down to a tenable size, I think. But it does require some help from our audience, and I think that's the right way for us to go forward anyway. I'd like to really make that be how we support the podcast, our listenership. What you get, ad-free versions of all the shows. You don't need to listen to ads. You paid for it. You also get access to the Club Twit Discord, which is really a great hang. It's my favorite social media hangout. Great, smart people talking about interesting things, not just our shows. You also get access to special programming that we don't make available in public right away. Things like our coffee club and our book club. And we did the photo review last week with Chris Marquardt. The plan is to stream those live. That's, by the way, another thing the club's made possible, to stream those live and then make them private to the club for the first month. And then after a month, make them public to everyone, because we want to build our audience, right? So you get early access to those kinds of things. $7 a month, twit.tv/clubtwit. Do check out the 2-week free option. If you're on the fence, you could try it, see if you like it. Maybe you don't need those ads. There's also, I think, and I wish more people took advantage of this, a great option to get a free month when you refer somebody to Club Twit. All you have to do is, as a member, is you're going to have a special referral link that's unique to you. Put that on your socials, send it to friends, put it on your website, let everybody know. And for everybody that joins, because of that link, you get a free month, which means you could really subsidize your entire membership. All the details at twit.tv/clubtwit. We thank you so much for your support. And thanks especially to the existing club members. We really, really appreciate what you do. Let's get the picks of the week with Mr. Jason Snell, our first picker.
All right, first picker, great. There's an arms race happening in my neighborhood about like holiday things.
Oh dear,
it's people with giant inflatable pumpkins and stuff, and like lots
I feel
of
inflatables are really cheating.
Yeah, and then lots of lights. People putting lights in trees and lights on their fences and lights on their houses, and I'm never gonna out excitement them. They're always gonna be, those people are motivated, but I do want to be like in the game. We put up cheap, lousy holiday lights on our roof line for years. They last a couple of years. They fall apart. They leave like stupid plastic anchors that snap off after a while.
I had to go around the house picking up plastic anchors for years.
Yeah, it's just the worst.
I feel like thousands of them everywhere.
So I can't say that everybody should do this, because there is a I found a Reddit post that linked to a Google Doc or a Google spreadsheet where a guy actually listed all of the companies that make permanent holiday lights and ranked them in terms of like cost and do they project down or do they shine out, and how do you mount them? And after all of that, I'm going to recommend Everlights, because it's what I bought, myeverlights.com. They will do professional installs, but there's also a DIY kit. A lot of our listeners probably would be into the DIY side. That's what I got, is the DIY kit. It's a bunch of lights and a wireless controller and a base station and a bunch of aluminum sheet track. Ooh. And the idea there is that you mounted you can also actually, it's made so that if you've got traditional gutters, which I don't, you can just drill a hole every 9 inches and the little lights stick out of the gutter, and then you put a little plastic
you have to have a
cap on the other side and screw it in, and then they're anchored there. But they're really robust. It's 4 wires, so there's a power, a ground, and then 2 data cables, so that you have the ability, it's more robust. Basically, if one of the data cables loses connect, they've got another one. And it's all very flexible. You can, you can snip it wherever you need to and then reattach it. And they've got they include in the starter kit a bunch of heat shrinking connectors so that you can keep everything waterproof. And I managed to sort of like snip bits with scissors out of the aluminum so that I could get it underneath the overhang of my roof, which is flat. But has some beams that stick out from the house. So I snipped little spaces so that I could slide it up and the beams wouldn't get in the way.
Cool.
I screwed all that in all the way across the front of our house, put in the line, wired it all up. They've got an app that you use to control the patterns. They come, they do a bunch of different colors, but they'll also like do patterns and blinking and anything you want out of it. They got a bunch of pre-built patterns that you can build your own. And I've been pretty happy with it so far. I'm very impressed. It has hit the spot. It was a fun, although a little bit challenging, just because it took a lot of time. Fun challenge to set it up. And now that I got it, we don't have to hang little plastic clips. We don't have to have the crappy. These are much higher quality lights. There are other options out there too, but I'm just going to say, if you're getting tired of the holiday light thing, paying a little bit more and getting ones that will last is a better approach if you can afford that initial upfront payment. So far, I'm pretty happy with it. Happy how it looks. And so, and they've got an app. It's completely iOS controllable and presumably Android controllable too, but I didn't check because I don't care. And it's good. It's good. I like it. So Everlights, myeverlights.com. They are very nice. I had a support issue. They responded to my email. They responded to my phone call. We got it all working. So it's a small group of people in Utah that build these things and sell them, and anyway, so that was my
So what are you going to do
adventure.
after Christmas? Are you just going to turn them off? Or
No, I'm the Empire State Building of my neighborhood now, man. I've got Thanksgiving lights out there, and I'm going to have some on the days that Cal plays football. It's going to be blue and gold out there.
Oh, now we're talking.
And
okay.
My wife has already instructed me to build a Hanukkah pattern where I'm going to have 8 lights that start with one yellow and then grows
clever.
over time. I'm all in. So this is going to be fun. It's like everybody out in the street is going to be like, what does that even signify? I guess ask, but I will know.
It's Hanukkah lights. Yes.
Ask me why the lights are that color. I will probably have a story for you. So yeah, we'll see how long that lasts before I say I don't want to be the Empire State Building anymore. But for now, if there's something to celebrate, I will find a way to celebrate it in lights.
Love it. I think that's great. Everlights. Thank you, Jason. Alex Lindsay, your pick of the week, sir.
So I've talked about this in the past. This is for a always works solution for getting USB in and out. I still consider this the best one in the world. This is a USB Pre 2.
I love that.
Yeah, I've got. That's how you're hearing me too.
Yeah, this is. There's the Mix Pre, which is more complex. This one is a tank, but it's $1,100.
Yeah,
so
that's the problem.
It's so, and you can see at one point, I don't know when it was, but at some point, this is number 58 that I owned.
Wow.
so we use them for all of our kits. I've been out trying to get audio into the iPhone so that I can take in board records when we're doing spatial streaming, and so I didn't want to do $1,100 a unit. So I was trying to figure out how do we get it down to something a little less. And what we found, or what I found so far, and I'm going to be testing it some more today, but so far it's worked perfectly, is this is the Neva Duo, and there's a Neva Solo. And this is a USB-C audio interface. It does have... it has some outputs, some quarter-inch outputs on the back, but more importantly, it's got two XLR inputs on the balanced inputs there. So you can get and this is only, I think, $89, and I think the Uno, I guess not do Solo, but the Uno is only $59. So far these have worked real well. Not the same build quality or the same number of features that I'm used to with the larger one, but for getting these basic sources in, if you're looking for something like that, this is working fairly well, and it works with the iPhone. It's a little tricky because since 17.6, the iPhone has been really tricky about which audio interfaces that it will see. And so this is one of the ones that it'll see, and part of it is because it doesn't have a lot of feature sets in it. Like it doesn't. We've had trouble getting it to consistently see the Mix Pre 3, the Scarlett, a bunch of other things. And so this one is inexpensive. Can plug it in. It'll do microline, and it's working pretty well.
What do you use for the output?
What do I use the output for?
No, what do you use the output for the iPhone? How do you connect the iPhone to it?
The iPhone, I just plug it in. It's just USB-C.
Oh, so the USB-C port on that will plug into the iPhone?
This USB-C, you just plug straight into your iPhone, and now you have an interface. I wish it had like a
powers it too, yeah?
The iPhone will power. Now, I'm usually, in the kit that I'm using it for, if I have it.
I thought that was the power. The USB connector was the power and audio out, but this could be audio in as well.
So... it's audio in is what I'm using it for.
Oh, it's audio in.
It can do audio out. It's got two quarter 20s on the back, so it's doing balanced audio out.
Right.
I'm using it with the way this is kind of set up tonight. I'm actually, my daughter's playing at Hot Monk tonight. If anyone wants to see.
Your daughter's playing at Hot Monk?
Yeah.
With Toad the Wet Sprocket?
No. The high school she goes to does... the high school has a rock band class, and that rock band class gets to go through like 6 or 7 bands that play 4 songs each, and they're all playing at Hot Monk tonight. And it's
the battle of the bands.
Yeah, there's no battle, but they have a good time. She's part of a band, 2 bands actually, but the band that I'm going to go record is Joystick Failure.
Does she sing? Does she play?
She's playing. I think she plays rhythm guitar in one band and either drums or bass in the other band.
Wow.
So she's
very talented.
She is. She plays a lot. But yeah, so this is the rig that I'm taking with me. This is using the Belkin 4-to-1 USB Pre 2. I know this is big. This is as big as she'll let me.
Somebody's dad is a big nerd.
I offered to bring 3 cameras, a switcher, a live view, and stream the whole thing, and I was told, Dad. No. So this is what I'm using here. So I have power going into this, and then this will go into that, and then the phone will hook into all of this, and that's how you get all the things to go
Very
together.
nice.
So anyway, but finding this kind of an inexpensive interface to get into the phone was a thing that we needed to figure out.
Wow. And you just earned us $10 with that pick from Hassan Ahmad, who says my favorite podcast on YouTube, and forked over $10 on YouTube.
Hey.
I don't know what YouTube money conversion rate is, but thank you, Hassan. And thank you, Alex, for the pick. So we use a lot. We use the Scarlett, Focusrite Scarlett. Would this be a replacement for that, you think?
Theoretically, I haven't tested it. I'm using line ins, so you always got to the way you measure
Test it with
an
the mics,
interface is with mics, because the mic interface, the preamp is much more important.
That's a key. Yeah.
So I haven't tested this one with microphones. I did test it with like an SM58, and it was like, and it works.
Okay.
But I didn't test it in. But I haven't tested it for like what is its bass noise level. So what are those types of things. But we'll try to do that in the future, and I'll let you know in another episode.
It's a good price. ESI's Niva Uno or Duo, which isn't quite correct Italian, but we'll take it. That leaves Andy Ihnatko for your pick of the week, sir.
Okay, well, there's a lot of reasons why we have notes apps, which is one of the reasons why I have lots of notes apps running at the same time. Two of the reasons are, one, you want to have something handy when you need to write something down right now before you forget it, like you're on a phone call or something like that. And another one is when there's just a piece of text that you need to come back to time and time again. Like in my case, like there's a terminal command for doing something really, really handy in a one fell swoop. And so I just keep it nearby so I can just simply copy and paste it when I need it. And so that's why one of my favorite apps for the Mac is called Tot, T-O-T. The URL to find out about is tot.rocks, and it's a very, very, very correct URL because it does indeed rock. Very, very simple, very, very clean. It's a menu bar app that just simply has 7 pages of notes, so that whenever you need just to write something down, like someone's giving you a phone number, I need to write it down, click on the menu bar and just simply write it down. That's great. Or you can organize these 7 pages the way you want, any way you want. It's not 6 colors, it's 7 colors. Each one is a different color. And so, again, if there's ever a URL for a regular Zoom meeting that I have, and for some reason Zoom is not like discovering the URL for it, I can go to this note and quickly grab it from there. And that's really all I need to say about it. It's not really complicated. It has shortcuts support. You can use Markdown if you want to use Markdown. That's fine. And it does sync to iCloud, so that if you have, it can sync between your Macs and your iPhones. But if you're just using the Mac version, it's absolutely free. You can just download it, install it. It's free. $20 one-time purchase if you want to use it on iOS and therefore use the iCloud sync service. But again, it's been on my menu bar forever, and it's one of those things where if there was a new version of Mac OS that it weren't compatible with, that would be a very, very bad day. I'd have to make some changes, and I'm re-recommending it now because every now and then you really should take a look at the tools that you rely on each and every day the most, and make sure that it's still the best solution for that task you have for it. I spent a few days, like last week, looking to see, is there another like really quick, handy, take a note and keep it handy utility, whether it's a menu bar or a widget or whatever like that, and I wasn't able to find anything that was nearly as good as that. Again, for this simple task, it's not the central truth of my note taking. It's not what I reach for when I need to jot down ideas or things like that. I use Google Keep for that. But again, for that simple task of I right now have to write something down, I don't have time to launch an app, or I need to, what's that Unicode dingbat that I sometimes use to end blog posts with? I just keep that cut and pasted right in there, so I can just simply grab it. Really, really great. It's by the Icon Factory, so it's pretty good stuff. Again, highest recommendation.
And it has an excellent URL, tot.rocks. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Andy, Ihnatko, Alex, Lindsay, Jason Snell. Thanks to all of you for joining us. We do MacBreak Weekly every Tuesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC. Actually, no, it's 1900 UTC because we're now on Standard Time. 1900 UTC. You can watch us do it on 8 different streams. We are now on YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, Kick, and of course our Club Twit Discord. So lots of ways to watch us live. That's why I mentioned the live time. But honestly, you really can also watch or listen anytime It's convenient for you because we make a copy of the show and distribute it via the internet. They call that a podcast. You can get your copy of the podcast at twit.tv/mbw. That's our website. You can also, if you go there, you'll see a link to a YouTube channel dedicated to MacBreak Weekly. That's for the video, of course, but a good way to share clips. If you said, oh, I got to send this tot recommendation out, you could do that very easily with the YouTube channel. Of course, the best way to do it is subscribe in your favorite podcast player so you get it automatically the minute it's available. Andy, when are you going to be on GBH next?
Not this week, but the week from Thursday at 12:30. Go to wgbhnews.org to stream it live or later, or stream any of my previous reports.
Jason Snell is at sixcolors.com. Go there for the color charts.
Many charts.
Stay for the fun. You also will hear a few podcasts with Jason. You can find them all at sixcolors.com/Jason.
Indeed. Thank you,
Jason.
Good to be here, as always.
And Mr. Alex Lindsay, officehours.global. What you doing on office hours these days?
Well, a lot of what we're doing, we're actually simplifying things a little bit for a while. We're not having as many of our second hours so that we can move the quality of the show forward because we've been lagging a little bit. And so we just added 4K. so we're now streaming in 4K, which we realized it hits a different place in YouTube, so everything's sharper for some reason, even in 1080p.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so we've done 4K. We're moving finally to HDR, 60 frames a second, 5.1. So those are all getting added to the show over the next 2 months, and so it will be a very pure Q&A because we're not sure how every day will go. So anyway, but we've decided to get real aggressive about solving that between now and the end of the year. So you'll see a bunch of that and some pretty interesting tests as we get a little closer to that.
Nice. Officehours.global. You can watch every morning, and you can even participate if you go to the website.
You can just go and 24/7. You can just go askofficehours.global and you can just ask a question and then listen
leave your
for
questions.
it. Yeah. We get to them usually within a day or two.
And of course, graymatter.show, the podcast you do for Michael Krasny at graymatter.show. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Of course, if you haven't voted yet, I give you permission. We ended a little early, so you have 6 minutes before Security Now to go vote. I'm sure
it'll be that quick.
Make sure you do your civic duty. It's actually a great feeling to vote and have your voice be heard. And as my wife always says, if you don't vote, you don't get to complain. So vote. We will be back next week with the same old crew and the same great stories. Thanks for being here. Now I have to tell you, unfortunately, it's time to get back to work because break time is over. Bye-bye.